So no doubt by now you've probably seen some of the cooler action shots that SWLU has to offer, but I've never taken the time to explain just how does it all work. I've always just shown off the cool action shots without the HUD on and other things like that, but I've never explained what's actually going on behind the scenes and how it actually works. So if you want to do this in your game, you can actually pull it off. So this is an end game level MLCC battle. I'm the Empire, and I'm fighting the rebels in their home sector of Argon Prime. And I can guarantee you that since I didn't bring my carrier, I'm not going to take a single loss in this fight. I may have to retreat by the end of this, but I'm not going to end up taking a single loss. We might have some hull damage on the Tartan patrol cruisers, which are the lightest ships in my fleet, and they're quite honestly replaceable losses. But the only things you should be losing in a proper battle are fighters. Fighter losses are pretty much unavoidable, but all other ships, you shouldn't be taking any losses. And notice I'm not giving any commands. All my ships are targeting the ships that are most appropriate for them. The Tartans are mopping up fighters, the Star Destroyers are focusing on the Mon Cals, and the lighter destroyers like the Carracks, let's see if we can find one, they're going to go around and take out all the corvettes and escort the Star Destroyers to back them up. And as their targets get destroyed, or as the battle situation changes, they're automatically going to continue carrying out their orders. They're going to automatically retreat, and ships that take hull damage will automatically wait at my headquarters so I can just repair them with one click. And this command was issued with one button. So this is called MLCC. The Military Logistics Command Center is what I believe it stands for, but it's LitCube's fleet management system. So we'll get here. As you can look, there are probably going to be timestamps because this is going to be a very long video, but this is endgame. You're not going to have MLCC, and you don't need it. There are a lot of players that pull out these types of battles without ever needing to actually use MLCC, and it's definitely not needed to do fleet battles. But it's one of my favorite things to use, and I use this in Mayhem as well, and it's quite efficient. But let's start from the basics. So before we get to the massive fleet battles, let's start off with some basic movement commands. As you play a game of LitCube's universe, or SWLU, you need to get in the LitCube mindset. In the base game, it was all about you powering up your main ship and taking on the world. There's infamous videos out there of players taking on Xenon Qs, which are heavy M7 destroyers, with nothing but an M3 fighter. That's not possible in LitCube. From my experience in vanilla, you could also take an M7, such as the Talati Shrike or an Argon Cerberus, and pilot that and successfully take out ships much bigger than your own, such as Pirate Brigantines or Xenon Ks. And that's simply not possible in LitCube. When it comes to LitCube, all ships are pretty much equal. The cheesiness of dodging enemy lasers, because they were very slow in vanilla and the poor AI couldn't really handle them, isn't really existent. And fighters aren't going to just crash into stations and blow up like in vanilla due to the bounce script. So fighters are viable, and the general concept of LitCube is quantity over quality, because the game has been restructured such that you can spam massive amounts of ships without fear of losses. So there's no reason to have the mindset where you just try to take your one ship and take on the world. Yes, the player has an advantage over AI ships. The player is able to take out a squadron much bigger than their own, such as if you had a heavy fighter, you could probably do a defend station mission that spawned about 10 enemies, because those fighters aren't currently targeting you, and you have much better aim and are able to have better tactics than the rest of the AI. You're able to outsmart them, but you're not going to be able to take on huge targets. The way to do that in LitCube is not just to bring your own battleship, which you can, but it's simply to bring more ships. So let's go over basic movement commands, because as you play, you should always have multiple ships with you. You should not have just your one ship going around. Whenever you take on a combat mission, you should bring a group of ships with you. Have a fighter squadron. You're going to find hundreds and hundreds of salvaged fighters. If I look at my satellite network and I set it to M5, all of these, look at all these abandoned ships. There's 5 of them right here in one sector. So there's going to be no shortage of fighters. And what most players do, from what I observe, is every fighter they salvage, they just take it to a shipyard and sell it. But alternatively, what you can do is you can take every fighter you salvage, and they're already going to have the combat commands built in, so you don't need to give them any software upgrades. All you have to do is repair them, which should be really quick because you have the repair laser on the spacesuit in Star Wars SWLU, and just upgrade their engine at the nearest shipyard. That's all you have to do. Just repair them and give them an engine upgrade, and then you have a ship to escort you, or you have, a ship to run security. These salvaged fighters make up an excellent scrappy fighter wing in the early game. A lot of players are in the mindset that, I'll sell all these bad fighters because I only want to have good ones. And once they're very well established, much later in the game, they're going to buy only the best fighters, such as the B-Wing or the Cormac Heavy Fighter for the Mandalorians, and you'll spend a lot of time outfitting them to be perfect, right? That is not the mindset you need to have. Take everything you can get and just spam them. They're all disposable. Fighters are disposable in Litcube's universe. They're so cheap, they're not really worth much, and don't put thought or care into them, and absolutely do not get attached to them. And if you play your cards right, like I'm about to show you some tips, you're not really going to take many losses at all. So starting with movement commands. One of the most important commands is telling a ship to follow you. And the fastest way to do that is, so we have 3 tri-fighters in this sector. They're all just separatist medium fighters, and we want them to follow us because we're going to take them into Void of Opportunity and fight all of these pirate fighters. And we're going to use them to clear the sector. So I only have 3 right now to demonstrate docking. So this Corvette I'm using is a Separatist Longhorn Corvette, and it can dock, let's see, where is it? It can dock 2 fighters. So if I tell all 3 ships to follow me, like so. So if I go here and click orders, follow me, orders, follow me, and orders, follow me, all 3 of my tri-fighters are going to follow. Now, because I have docking capacity, they're going to dock. Now, I didn't tell them to dock at me, which I certainly could have. I could have given them the docking command. But any ship set to follow or protect a target will automatically land at it if they're able to. So if you have a squadron of TIE fighters and you tell them to follow a Star Destroyer, they are going to land at that Star Destroyer. And as you can see with the 3rd tri-fighter, because, let's start moving, because there's no more docking space, it's going to actually follow me. And if I told Corvettes or bigger ships to follow me, because this Corvette cannot, my personal ship cannot dock a Corvette-sized ship, they're just going to follow like normal. So that's how the follow command works. Now, the protect command is another very basic command. So if I go into Command Console, Combat, protect me, what they're going to do is they're going to follow me, so they're only going to follow until I take damage. So once my ship, or whatever ship they're told to protect, takes damage, then they will be given an attack command on the attacker to get revenge. So let's give them all the protect command. So let's give them all the protect me. So orders, protect me.
Command accepted. Command accepted.
And so they're still docked, and if they weren't docked, they would have docked. And this one on the side is still following me. So if I were to go ahead and get shot at, so let's go ahead and do that. Well, no, I don't have time to do that. But if I were to take damage from any source, the ships would automatically launch and they would attack whoever attacked me. And once that ship was destroyed, and given that no other ships would attack me, so likely you're going to be taking on a whole bunch of ships, so they would probably fight all the enemies until my ship, all of its attackers are destroyed, and the one that's following us wouldn't need to launch, it would just do that anyway. And then they'd still be on the protect command, so they would just land at me. And this is a pretty hands-free way to do it, so just have all your ships set to protect you. But the problem with that is that usually they're too late to respond. If you get attacked, you're going to be in danger and you need to shoot first. So this is a reactive way to handle it. The protect command is fine if your ship can take the heat. And a light corvette like this Longhorn I'm using is not really the best to take on a massive group of ships, because once the enemies lock onto a target, they're not going to change targets until their target is destroyed or it jumps out or something happens like that. And that's just the way X3's AI works. So if there's an enemy up here in the sector and it is currently attacking me, it doesn't matter if there's ships right beside it that are shooting at it. It's going to do nothing but fly down here and attack me. So usually the first ship that enters their range, or the first ship that shoots at an enemy squadron, will be the one that aggroes them. So most likely that's going to be the player ship. So if I aggro all the enemies, it's going to be a good thing, because these tri-fighters are going to not be targeted. All the enemies are going to be attacking me, and my corvette, which is much heavier than these tri-fighters, will be tanking the damage. Now the problem is, my corvette is eventually going to die very quickly because all of the enemies will be focused on me, and before my tri-fighters could kill them, that my ship is going to be destroyed. So what we want to do is we want to shoot first, and to do that we're going to need a bit more fighters than this. So let's pretend that I have a decent sized fighter squadron. This is 20 tri-fighters. Now there's no reason you shouldn't have this early in the game, because as you scavenge, they won't be uniform like these tri-fighters, but as you scavenge all those ships you find, and if you're using tug, like I've covered in a previous tutorial, you can consolidate them all in one location, and they'll all have equipment. Ships you salvage will already have lasers, most likely. So you can just add them to a fleet like this, and, well, when I say add them to a fleet, I just mean bring them with you. And you can have a big fighter squadron. So to command multiple units, the way you do it is, once your squadron gets too big, it's not practical to click orders, follow me for all of them. What you do is you click, go to the commands console, broadcast to all ships in the sector, and this is how I personally do all of my fleet commands that isn't MLCC. And even with MLCC, I use this. So broadcast to all ships does not use wings, and it doesn't use wingmen, and it doesn't use MLCC. This is how I do it. And I'll go over in a bit why wings are terrible, and I personally despise them. And I never use wings, and you should always use this, but this is what you need to get used to. So you need to get used to getting to this menu fast. So click C2, let's see, no, not combat. So click C, and it's either going to be 5 or 6. So if you click C, down, 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 enter, you'll get to this, and you'll get used to the muscle memory. But you can group all fighters, so M5, M4, M3 ships in the sector. And then another useful one that's grayed out is M6, M7, and fighter drones down here is another good one too. And then number 6 just selects all the ships. So we're going to select number 2. And then unfortunately this list is quite limited. There are better combat commands out there, such as escort, attack nearest target, or things like that. But if we're going to mass broadcast like this, we're limited to this. But this is all we really need. So let's tell all of them to follow us. So let's go to the menu, go to broadcast to all ships, M3, and we will want them to follow me. Or what we should do is broadcast to all M3 and protect me. And 2 of the ships are going to dock with me, and the rest are going to follow in the formation. So the way formations work is, if we look at my ship, so this is my ship's command console, you'll see formation is X delta. And what the X delta formation is, as these tri-fighters get into position, and let's start moving, you'll see that they form a big X centered on me. You can kind of see the X here. I don't really have enough ships to do that. And this one's fine. This has the lead ship in front and all of the fighters behind, so it's good for a protect setup. So if you're using your main ship to tank damage, remember, your goal in a fighter squadron versus fighter squadron is to have the enemy fighters all focusing on a tanky ship so that your fighters don't get shot at, because fighters are very fragile and they're very annoying to have to replace, because you don't want fighters shooting at other fighters. You want your fighters to shoot at the enemy fighters, while the enemy fighters are stuck shooting at a tank such as a Corvette or a bigger ship if you have that. So this is a decent formation if I'm going to lead the attack, which we are in the coming example. But if we cycle, we have pyramid, which forms up in a, well, maybe if I wasn't moving so fast. I believe it's a triangle centered behind me. It's kind of hard to tell. I don't really have enough ships for this. But the only other notable one is the shield. And what the shield is they form up in a circle in front of the lead ship. And the way this works is any ship that your fighters or any of your fleet ships are told to follow, in this case they're told to protect my Longhorn, which means they're set to follow my Longhorn, that ship's formation is what they're going to adhere to. So if I look at this Tri-Fighter's command console, it has its own formation. So if other ships were following it, they would use the Delta formation with this Tri-Fighter as the formation leader. So because my Longhorn is the formation leader, now that's not a specification, it just means they're following my ship, so they're going to use the formation that was specified in my ship's command console. In that case, it's the shield, which is just a wall of ships in front of me. So as I move, right, the wall of ships in front of me is just going to stay in front of me. And this is a really bad example because I don't think I even put rudder optimization on these things. But it is a circular wall in front of the lead ship. So this is good if you're going up against really big targets and you have Corvettes following you. So Corvettes are pretty tanky in terms of the early game. And if you're also in a Corvette, or if you're in a ship class that's equal to your followers, and you're not going to use your player ship as a tank, you want the shield, because this will put all of your ships in front of you, so that all of your ships can get shot at first and disperse all the enemy fire, and that will prevent you from dying. And Corvettes are excellent for this. So if you have a wall of Corvettes in front of you, that will take the fire off of your main ship, and it will let the Corvettes get into shooting range faster. It's unfortunate these Tri-Fighters aren't behaving that well. So we're in the pirate sector, and if you look at the map, we've got quite a bit of company. There's a lot of pirate ships. So let's see if we can take the sector. Well, I say take the sector, but let's clear out the sector without taking any losses on Tri-Fighters. And I might lose one or two, but it should be possible. So the way I'm going to do that is they're all on Protect Me right now, and these M5s up here shouldn't really give me any problems. In fact, I don't even think they're aggroing me yet. But now they are. They're shooting at me. In fact, they're shooting at the Tri-Fighters. So because the Tri-Fighters are set to protect me, they're not even going to react to enemy ships shooting at them. And that's a colossal problem. And that's something negligent players are going to lose ships to. Because the Tri-Fighters are taking heat from the fighters, and they're not reacting. So what we need to do is broadcast to all ships, M3s, attack all enemies. And they'll attack the nearest enemies. In that case, it's going to be this group right here. And because I have so many, they're going to be able to overwhelm these enemies pretty quickly. And because I was the first thing that entered the sector, let's tell our ship to attack missiles only. Hopefully we can shoot those down. I don't think I've lost any Tri-Fighters yet. This one seems to be taking heat, so let's tell it to dock at me. Hopefully get out of the fight a little bit. I have 2 landed with me. Actually, no, I don't, because they launched earlier. So what you want to do with enemies is overwhelm them. And if you do have to take on an equally sized group head on, you're going to want to lead with a tank, such as my Corvette. And the way you could do that is, let's say this one, we're going to call this the waypoint. So let's use a waypoint. So let's use the move to position command on this one, back there. Let's tell all the ships in the sector to follow the waypoint. And that included the waypoint, so let's give it the move to position command again. Let's tell it back there. So that's how you can tell groups of ships to move to places, like an RTS game. So now I'm going to have all my fighters get behind me. So they're moving over there. I'm going to engage the enemies with my Corvette.
Pirate.
Well, not counting this guy. We're going to go to that giant fighter squadron to the north. And that's going to be the main target. And we're going to try and take that out without any losses. This guy should be easy. We're going to need to equip heavier weapons on this. So it looks like they're in a formation of their own as well. Now, my Corvette is not heavily armed enough to actually take out that group of fighters. So this is where, if you were playing the game regularly, like this wasn't LitCube's universe, you would run into lots of problems. So let's tell all the ships to follow me.
Command accepted.
Basically just to get them in position. We'll give them an attack command later. Let's tell our turrets to attack again.
Alert. Missile closing.
Got a missile. I don't know if I have chaff. No, I do not. That means we have to use our turrets. 5 is missiles. So our fighters are closing. Alright, I'm taking heat. So they're all on me. So now I can tell all my fighters to attack all enemies. And all I have to do is survive. Which I think my Corvette will at least be able to hold until the Tri-Fighters get in here and take out most of the pirates. So if we look at the map, our Tri-Fighters are all closing in. Here comes the swarm. I'm going to get behind the Tri-Fighters because the pirates are going to keep attacking me and they're most likely going to ignore the Tri-Fighters. Even though the Tri-Fighters are the immediate threat to them. Looks like a few pirates in the back have targeted some of the Tri-Fighters, but for the most part they're attacking me. Which I probably should have brought a bigger Corvette, or at least had a second Corvette alongside me as a Corvette that the pirates could have also shot at. Another good thing about Corvettes is that they can emergency jump. So what I can do in a difficult fight is I can jump to the west gate. And notice none of the Tri-Fighters have died yet. They're fighting enemies much tougher than them, and enemies that can probably one-shot them, like the Havocs down there. But we haven't lost any because the enemies are focused on me. Looks like this one has started attacking the Tri-Fighters. So this group of enemies is mostly down. We did lose one, and I think that's because this fighter was in the back, or we have missile problems. So these Tri-Fighters aren't equipped to handle missiles. Alright, let's tell all the ships. Let's tell them to follow the waypoint.
Command accepted.
Let's tell the waypoint to move to position. Let's see, over here. Let's get them out of the way. We want to get in front of all the Tri-Fighters. The Tri-Fighters are very fast, so we shouldn't have any issues here. Alright, let's tell the waypoint to move to position way out there. Now, I don't have the shields to continue this fight, so I'm just going to tell all the ships to attack anyway. This is probably not going to go well. These are all heavy M3s, and my Corvette is not equipped for this. Definitely don't want to get hit by tornado missiles, because those are heavy dump fires. Alright, so I'm probably going to lose this fight, but you get the main premise. You can order your groups around using the broadcast to all ships, and you absolutely do not want to use a wing to do it. And I'm going to go over that next, depending on whether or not I win this fight. And actually, aside from, unless I get hit by some crazy torpedo, I think I'm actually going to come out on top on this. I got a few missiles. Remote guided warheads are not good for attacking fighters. So we've lost 2 Tri-Fighters so far. And really, the remote guided warhead is probably more expensive than the Tri-Fighters themselves. So remember, in LitCube's universe, do not get attached to your fighters and do not put too much thought into them. They're basically, you just spam them. They're cheap units, like in an RTS game, you know, early units that you can just throw out in swarms. You don't want to waste all of your time building perfect fighters only to lose them later, because you will lose fighters, and that's okay. It's the hardest adjustment to make when you're playing LitCube's universe for the first time. It's okay to lose ships. And I definitely want a better fleet composition than this. I want ships with chaff, Now, you don't want to give chaff to all your fighters. Remember, you don't want to invest too much. So we can have a dedicated chaff ship, like an M8 or an M7M with a missile turret with chaff, and that missile turret can be set to attack all missiles, and it will fire chaff and protect the entire fleet. So a K-Wing, a Marauder Cruiser, a Slave One, anything with a missile turret, going all the way up to the Free Virgilla and the Victory Star Destroyer missile variant, will be able to protect an entire fleet from chaff. I mean, from missiles using chaff. And see, the way enemy AI works in X3 is that they don't retarget, and you can't distract them from their current target until their target dies. Okay, running into a Pirate TIE Defender is certainly rare. You don't want to have to deal with that. But I think I've only lost 4 Tri-Fighters at this point, and the Pirates have definitely lost way more expensive ships. That TIE Defender is probably worth like probably 5 Tri-Fighters, and it's probably not going to kill a single one. And another thing that you'll learn, especially once you get into MLCC, is that the numbers advantage is huge in Litcube's universe. So if I were to come in here with only 10 Tri-Fighters, which is about half, I'd probably lose twice as many. And if I came in here with 30 Tri-Fighters, the Pirates would all die extremely quickly, which probably would reduce my losses. So having a numbers advantage is a hugely important thing as well. Now once this Y-Wing goes down, I'm pretty sure that the sector is going to be cleared of fighters. And don't worry about the hull damage, because in Litcube's universe, if you didn't know already, hull damage is basically meaningless. I mean, you just repair it. Or, even better, don't even bother repairing it. If they're still fast enough to keep up, don't even bother repairing them. It's not worth the effort. Unless you're super early in the game and these fighters are like your only ships, then, you know, get out and repair them. But you don't need to worry about hull damage because equipment can't be destroyed. So if I went down to 1% hull on my ship, I wouldn't lose a single item out of my inventory. In vanilla, you started to lose items and equipment as you took hull damage. Another thing in Star Wars SWLU is that you can see them while doing the repair laser in the spacesuit. It's something that not everyone knows, but it's something I've added to make the game a lot more trivial. So anyway, feel free to use other ships. That is the basis of Litcube combat. You need to bring other ships with you and never go it alone. And bringing in extra corvettes and having fighters follow individual corvettes. So say I had 2 corvettes with me, I could have half my fighters set to follow 1 corvette and half the fighters set to follow, and when I say follow, I mean like escort or protect or whatever. And they would attack the nearest enemy for that corvette, and you could manually issue the orders to 2 corvettes. So therefore, it's like having 2 commanders, right? I can order 1 corvette to do something, and it will go with its escort to accomplish that thing. And then I can order the other corvette, and its fighters will go along with it. So I don't have to command all the fighters, I only command the 2 ships that are leading them. And that's a basis of fleet command that you can use in Litcube's universe to great effect to simplify things, because you don't want to be issuing orders to all of your ships. It's just too tedious. Right, so in this example, I was using my corvette as a mini kind of fleet leader, right, when they were all following me and attacking enemy and all that. But there's a combat command called, let's see, combat escort attack nearest enemy. That is an excellent one for attacking quickly and defeating enemies fast, because unlike protect, which waits till the leadership gets attacked before the followers fight back, this one waits till enemy ships are in the vicinity of the leader before they branch off and attack, and therefore you engage and kill the enemy much faster before they have a chance to actually shoot off a whole bunch of lasers into your leader, which in this case was my ship. But what I'm saying is get like 2 other corvettes with you and have your fighters follow those corvettes. And then you can hide the fighters from the property menu. Don't even worry about them. You don't have to give those fighters another command. Just tell the corvettes to do stuff, and the fighters will be protecting those corvettes and attacking the enemies around them. And if you need to go take the nuclear option, you can always just broadcast to all ships, right, and tell them to attack a specific target, like a station or something, or like a high priority target that's giving you trouble that you need to take out, or attack all enemies. You know, just override everything with the broadcast to all ships command. And you can group them, you know, you can tell all the fighters to do it and not the corvettes. So the broadcast to all ships is a very powerful tool as well, especially for positioning ships. Another basic concept that I need to go over is the concept of turrets and missile turrets as well, which are very similar. On a ship, such as this Longhorn Corvette I'm using, it has main guns, which in the main cockpit are what you fire, and they are fixed forward. They can't pivot, they're not, so there's a difference between main guns and a forward turret. When you give a ship an attack order, such as attack, you know, an enemy fighter or something, that attack order is going to have the ship follow and attack that the target with only its forward guns. The attack command does not apply to turrets at all. Turrets are kind of like gunners in any other game where you have vehicles and you have gunners sitting in gunner spots. The gunners don't care what the pilot is doing. They're going to shoot at targets that they see, right? So in the command console, the command for turrets, I'm going to go into my own command console. So this ship has a left, right, and bottom turret. These are what the turrets are doing. So regardless of what the ship is doing, the turrets are going to attack all enemies because I have that set, or missile defense, or whatever, regardless of what the ship is doing. So if I have one of these Longhorn Corvettes set to follow me, right, so it's not actually going to attack any enemies, it's only going to follow me passively, its turrets are going to still shoot at enemies. And this is another pitfall many people can fall into, is that they don't know how to use big ships. Remember, big ships will not use their main guns, like this, unless they're actually told to attack. So you're not using your full firepower unless the ship is actually set to attack something. But another thing is ships that don't have main guns, such as this K-Wing. Like if I hop in the K-Wing, you notice down here, it doesn't even have main guns. The K-Wing only has 2 front turrets and a back turret. And the K-Wing is actually special, it's a bomber. So if you look in the info, you'll see that the front turret is a missile turret. And that means if I go in the front turret, I can actually shoot missiles from here. 2 at a time, unlike most ships which only shoot 1 at a time without a missile turret. And then it has another laser turret in the front. So the K-Wing, if you tell it to attack an enemy, it's basically the same thing as just telling it to follow that enemy. Because it doesn't have main guns, it's not going to shoot at the enemy. So with that in mind, we're going to use this K-Wing defensively. So we can tell it to follow me, and that way it'll follow me in formation or whatever. And there's no point in giving it, you know, really the protect me command, because that will mean it'll fly off and it will go through the motions and fly at enemy ships, but it's not going to attack anything, like directly. Like the turrets are going to shoot at everything they can see, which means the ship is still going to be shooting off lasers, but it's just going to be the turrets as the ship flies in view of the enemies. So therefore, escort ships like this K-Wing, which K-Wings, don't get me wrong, they can definitely bring down capital ships if told to attack them, and the missile turrets are all set to attack. But what I'm going to try and do here is let's use this K-Wing as missile defense. So the K-Wing is set to follow me. My ship it has turret commands as well. So I'm going to try and get some of these ships to shoot at me. And this K-Wing has chaff, and it also has the CCDS upgrade. Let's see, where is it? CCDS. It lets a ship other than the player ship shoot. It lets a ship shoot chaff automatically. You can shoot chaff without it by having the upgrade. I mean, there's a hotkey. Sorry, not an upgrade. You can shoot chaff with a hotkey. Well, it looks like these ships don't have missiles. That's quite unfortunate when trying to demonstrate a missile defense screen. So something you can do with the K-Wing is in a big battle, you could have the K-Wing set to follow the player ship or follow other, you know, high-value targets or something. And it's going to have the chaff support. Because it has that missile turret, it can fire 2 chaffs at once. And then we have the missile turret also set to missiles only. Okay, seriously, these enemies aren't going to shoot any missiles. But basically, what's going to happen is, if there are missiles in the air, the K-Wing is going to shoot them down for us. That way we don't have to go into our turrets and manually set them. And note, when I had the Tri-Fighters, they went down to missiles quite easily, because they didn't have their own missile defense. So instead of putting missile defense chaff on all your ships, which is expensive, have a dedicated chaff boat to protect the fleet. And this is something LitCube recommends as well. Now, of course, you don't want to just come in with only a coordinated K-Wing against these fighters. I was hoping they would shoot missiles at me, but I don't think they have any missiles, which is extremely unfortunate. The one time I need enemies to shoot missiles at me, they don't have any missiles.
Attention. Energy low.
But anyway, this is a setup you can use, and later you can upgrade to a M7M, like a Virgilla, an MC-30, a Victory Star Destroyer, or some upcoming Separatist ships. There we go. See, the K-Wing is able to fire off chaff extremely quickly, so that it has 2 missile turrets. So it has 2 launch points for missiles, which means it has twice the rate of fire for missiles. Let's see. Looks like it only shoots down the first one of those tornado missiles. Look at all that chaff coming off the K-Wing. It's shooting down all the missiles at once, and basically, you can see how it can protect the fleet. All those white missiles and chaff coming off the K-Wing. So, this is another tactic you can use if you don't want to have to deal with using turrets to shoot down missiles. Just have a dedicated missile ship. And any ship with a missile turret will work. Now, whoa, it tried to shoot all those down in time, but it couldn't. Now, not a lot of ships have missile turrets. I think only M8s and M7Ms do, and with very few exceptions, very few M2s do as well. I don't think any of the Star Wars ones do, but this is just something to consider. I don't think a lot of players know about this. So let me quickly go over why I don't like wings as opposed to the broadcast all ships command, which involves more menus, but I use it anyway. The thing with wings is that oftentimes there's an issue where if you tell a wing to do something, it will give the order to all of its member ships sequentially rather than simultaneously all at once, like the good old broadcast to all ships command. And the problem seems to get worse when you have a lot of ships in a sector. And it doesn't always happen, but when it does happen, your ships are just going to slowly trickle into battle one at a time and get killed rather than overwhelm the enemy all at once. And it's fine if they're all in a ship like the Secutor, which has 144 docked, right? Because they're going to be in a safe hangar, and this Secutor is definitely not going to go down easily. But if your wing is in space and you tell them to do it, and the sequential thing happens, they're all just going to sit there and wait. And I don't think it's going to happen now when I'm demonstrating because this sector is pretty empty. I think it has to do with, large groups of ships in a sector that causes the game to have that issue. But another thing is that let's put them all in a wing. So let's put all of the TIE interceptors. I have 144 TIE interceptors. They're now all in a wing. So if I go to my wings tab, which I never do, we have all these ships in a wing. And they're all docked at this Secutor Star Destroyer. The problem with this is that, say I just want to tell one ship to follow me. That's no longer really possible, because I can only give commands to the wing. You can access a single ship's command console, but it's very hard to do. So if I go to the command console button, it brings up the wing command console instead of the individual one. So you have to go down here, find your ship, click on this, open ship's command console, and then you're in the ship's command console. And even then, any commands you give it will be overridden by the wing command. That's why, as you add new ships to the wing, they're automatically given commands so that they do what the wing was doing. Which can be nice, right? So if you have a wing out in the open, you can just add ships to it and they'll go join the wing out in the open and form up and all that. But I can't stand being locked out of a ship's command console like this. I like being able to tell ships what to do. And another thing is, if you're like me and during a battle you don't like to just sit in your ship, you like to jump to all the other ships and, you know, fly around in all the ships and enjoy the sights, you'll be fighting with the wing. So the wing reissues its commands over time to all your ships. And not only is that bad for performance, but if you're flying a ship that's in a wing, and say the wing's current command is to attack all enemies or something, as you're flying that ship, and if your ship belongs to the wing, every so often when the wing command comes through, your ship is just going to be wrested from you, and the ship is going to bank hard and try to do whatever the wing was doing. So if I was flying one of these TIE interceptors while the wing was doing something, I'll have control of the ship but every like 10 seconds or so, the ship is going to engage autopilot and go do wing stuff, and it's very annoying to have to fight with it. And not to mention that you don't have access to the broadcast to all ships command, so you're only limited to what the wing can do, and they're just not they're inaccessible. And that absolutely terrible sequential orders bug is detrimental to tactics. So I'm not going to cover that, even though the bug doesn't always happen. I'm going to let me reload real quick before I ended up putting them in the wing. And another problem with wings is that you have a limited number of them. So if you want to have multiple fighter groups in a fleet, well, there's only so big that you can manage at a time. Versus if you group them by home base, like I do, and use broadcast to all ships or MLCC later, then you don't have this problem. There's no limit to how big your fleet can be. So what you do is you get a big carrier, like the Secutor, or two big carriers. You go to the carrier, click L, there's landed ships, find one ship's command console, broadcast to all docked ships. So there's two situations where you can use broadcast to all. And it's broadcast to all ships in sector if the ship that you're in the command console is in space, or broadcast to all docked ships. So those are the two groupings you can use. So let's say I have all of these fighters. Let's tell them to attack all enemies. You'll see them start pouring out of the Secutor hangars. There's 144 of them that need to come out. And they're going to go wreck the pirates. No problem. And at any time, I can broadcast to all ships in the sector, right? So now that they're in the sector, I can use that grouping, and then I can tell them to return back to the Secutor. And so say I had two carriers. Say I had a Venator and this Secutor. The Venator is going to launch its ships. The Secutor is going to launch its ships. After all the enemies are defeated, if they're still running the attack all enemies command, they're all just going to be sitting around in space, and you need to return them back to their fleets. To their carriers. This is another reason why wings aren't very good, because carrier management and organization is a lot harder with wings, especially since you have a limited number of them. So say all these fighters are done fighting. Well, let's actually wait till they're done fighting. Now remember, we don't care at this point in the game about fighter losses, but if we were trying to mitigate losses, we would lead the charge with a Corvette or something, get all the enemies engaged with that Corvette, and then the fighters will come in and mop them up later. Let's see. Fighters should go down relatively quickly. But anyway, so say I pretend I had 3 different carriers worth of ships in this fight. After the ships are done fighting, I'm going to broadcast to all ships in sector and say return home. So say each carrier's ships are home base to that carrier, which is how it should be. All ships are going to go back to their respective carriers. That way, you don't have to worry about selecting only the Secutor ships, only the Venator ships, only the Profundity ships, the MC-75, or however many carriers you have. So return home, and now they're all returning back to the Secutor, and they should all dock with the Secutor. I've got all kinds of nonsense going on. Sanctuary of Darkness. I think the Syndax Corporation is they're doing something. So anyway, now they're all returning to the Secutor. Shouldn't have any more problems. And if I had other ships, of other carriers, all of the ships would be returning to their home carriers. And this is how I group fighters when not using MLCC, just like this. It's a lot of TIE fighters this thing can carry. So if you have a Secutor, you're pretty much set. You don't really need additional carriers. So broadcast to all ships. Use it as often as you can. So another way to organize fleets with carriers and fighters is the carrier command software. And if we look at this Gazanti right here, it has 4 TIE Phantoms docked with it, and it also has the carrier command software. So first things first, I'm going to home base all of these Phantoms to the Gazanti. And this will work for any ship that has docking space. It doesn't even have to be a combat ship like this Gazanti. It can be a Star Destroyer, it can be even a Quasar, it can be anything that can dock ships. So normally to command the fighters, what you do is you click, you hit L. I didn't mean to hit launch a missile. You click on a TIE Phantom, you broadcast to all docked ships, all M3s, and then you have them do whatever, you attack something. And then once they're in the sector, you broadcast to all ships, return home. So there's 2 steps you have to take. What the carrier command software does is if you have the upgrade, you can click on the Gazanti, go to combat, and you'll see a new option called carrier command. Now it's very unfortunate that there's no hotkey for this. You have to click on it. So you have to click C2 and then you have to click on this manually or scroll the keyboard down. You can't get to it very quickly. But you have these commands here. So what these will do is the Gazanti will issue the commands to the fighters, and therefore you don't have to do broadcast to all ships. It's just another way you can do it. So say you have 5 carriers, each have 4 ships, so that's 20 ships. All 20 fighters are in the sector doing stuff. And say you only want one of the carriers to bring its fighters back and return out of there. You can't really do that without the carrier command software. Because you have 20 fighters in the sector, if you broadcast to return home, that will work, but it will also return to the other carriers and not just the one you want. So you can tell that carrier to go into its carrier command and issue the return home, and only this carrier's fighters are going to get the command. Another thing you can do with this is you can tell them to attack fighters, attack capitals, or something, or attack shields. That means they're going to attack it while the shields are up, and then once the target ship shields are down, they're going to resume. They're not going to attack it until the shields come back up. This is very useful for boarding or for ships that you don't want to kill. So you can't mass issue these 3 commands normally. Normally you can only get to these commands through the means of individually doing them. So this is how you mass issue those commands. You have to do it through the carrier command software. If you're not using MLCC, of course, because MLCC is way more advanced than this. And another good one is attack all enemies land. If you click on this, the fighters are going to attack all enemies in the sector, and once all enemies are dealt with, they're going to automatically return to the carrier. And while this is happening, I think you can't give the carrier any additional commands. Let's see. No, I think you can actually. So if I tell the Gazanti to follow me or something, I think you're free to command the carrier while this is happening. Right, so the Gazanti is performing its own order, so it's following me, and the ships came back to dock after verifying that there were no enemies in the sector. So the carrier command it doesn't occupy the carrier. You can have the carrier do other things after you issue the command, and then the fighters will still return home for the attack all enemies, land command. So that is the carrier command. Unfortunately, it's limited to individual carriers, so if you had 5 Gazantis, you'd have to do carrier command 5 times. I would instead recommend that you put those 5 Gazantis in a fleet, make one of them the fleet commander, and use the rally fleet option, and have all their home bases set, broadcast return home. But carrier command is another option for organizing ships. All of this micromanagement that I've been discussing could be quite difficult to get the hang of. So what I've done in the upcoming 1.2.8 update is I've added a new game start called Republic Holdout. And what this does is it puts you in a Republic sector surrounded by Separatist sectors. and it provides you a ton of separatist fleets to fight against. And it also provides you a ton of Venators, Republic fleets to support. So there's just a whole bunch of Republic fleets headed north, and there's a whole bunch of Separatist fleets defending Duke's Domain and heading south. And it also spawns a big old fleet that I'm looking at right now in the starting sector. And the player gets a Pelta Raider with a whole bunch of fighters. You get a ton of money. You have a shipyard. So let's see, where's the shipyard? Otas Shipyard. You can buy a whole bunch of Republic ships and outfit them and add them to your fleet, and you'll constantly get more money. And waves of fighters will spawn to report. Your fighters will spawn and respawn to support you, and it's just practice for fleet battles, not using MLCC. We'll get there. So you can see they're all following me in the shield formation. Should be more obvious as we zoom in and look at it this way. There's like a wall of fighters in front of me. And they're currently all set to attack nearest enemy. And this is a pretty decent fleet composition and configuration for giant fleet battles. So what we want to do is we want to get a Venator to attack first and draw off all the enemy fire, and then we will move in with our fleet. And if you head north, there's going to be a bunch of Venators heading north too, all headed towards the north gate. And this shipyard down here will spawn endless reinforcements. Same with the Separatists up north. And it'll just be a lot of practice for taking on big targets with a group of ships. And it's excellent for practicing with ships that don't, because you didn't buy these ships, right? You just got them all for free and they're already equipped. None of that hassle. It's just practice for managing groups of ships, because most players do not know how to manage groups of ships, and that's what this game start is for. And you get awesome battles. So come on, Separatists are fanning out with their fighter drones. Okay, all our fighters have gone in for the attack. Our fighters have been aggroed. Alright, so this is an example of what not to do. So the escort that they were doing is more for a defensive play. So if the Separatists were coming straight for us, it would be an excellent way to use the fighters. But if you were to send in a wing of fighters first, they're most likely all going to die. And you can, start this game start as many times as you want. And just mess around. And as you'll see here, I'm about to lose every single fighter in my fleet. And if I were to repeat this after the Separatists have engaged a station or a Republic Venator or something, I probably could have taken them out only losing 1 or 2 fighters. And if you wait every 20 in-game minutes, I think, so we're already at 14, you'll just get all of those fighters respawned again. So this is a good game start for that. So keep an eye out for this. And the battles will be endless either way. So even if you're not doing this game start, this sector still exists, and the endless reinforcements still spawn, so it's a good place to come and salvage or to join in on the fun. Gosh, what are they doing? Looks like they're coming back to me because the initial fighter drone they aggroed on has been killed. So now they're getting shot in the back, and it is just a big disaster. An example of how not to command a fleet. All those tri-fighters. So anyway, this is a good game start for that. So before I go into the nitty-gritty of MLCC, there is one extra system I forgot to mention, and that is the vanilla fleet commander system. And it's actually a system that works quite well, and it lets you group ships. So for any ship, let's use our Hammerhead Corvette as an example. We are going to make it a fleet commander. So what that does is it will let it broadcast to ships under its command, and you can use them to group ships. So let's rename it real quick. So Hammerhead Commander, and we will change the name, color anyway, so it stands out. We'll make it yellow. And then in the command console, you'll see, an option for Become Fleet Commander. So when you become Fleet Commander, you get these extra options. The important one is broadcast to all fleet ships. So you can broadcast all these commands to all ships under its control. So say you had two groups of fighters you wanted to keep separate. Using the standard broadcast to all ships in sector, you wouldn't be able to differentiate between the two. If you had two separate fleets, all with fighters in them, you could broadcast to the fleet ships and therefore control those two groups separately, which you can't do using broadcast to all ships in sector, which is why I usually do, and I just only broadcast attack all enemies, and it's not very precise. But if you wanted more precise micromanagement in your battles, then you can use a fleet commander. It also comes with these extra commands. So that's broadcast to all fleet ships for the fleet commander. So in your property menu, you should have the fleet commander as front and center, high up, so you can easily reach it and broadcast it to your fleet ships. And everything else in the fleet should be hidden from the property menu, most likely. You can probably even pin it like this to a monitor using Shift 1 or Shift 2, so you can easily access your fleet commander. But anyway, it also comes with this fleet tab, and what this does is they're not very functional in LitCube. I've never actually used them. I know Mayhem has expanded these and completely rewritten them, but you don't have to use this. I don't exactly know what this even does, but I always prefer to just use broadcast to all fleet ships. So let's say, for example,
Shipyard.
at the OTAS shipyard here, I bought a bunch of Y-Wings and a bunch of X-Wings, and I want them to be under command of the Hammerhead. So command console, so I have the shipyard selected, landed ships, hide from property menu, so I just hid all of these from the property menu. But under command console landed ships, we can assign them fleet commander, and this will be a list of all your fleet commanders, Hammerhead commander. So now we have 21 ships in the fleet, just like this. And unlike a wing, so this is why I like this system so much better than a wing. The fleet system, if you hit command console on a ship in the fleet, it just brings up the command console. And if we look under here, you can bring up the command console. So it's not as strict as a wing, and the fleet system will never have the bug with the wings where they'll slowly receive orders one at a time while your ships sit idle and die. So let's use the fleet commander. So broadcast to all fleet ships, follow, let's tell them to follow the commander. So what that did was, if we look at the map, we have a whole bunch of fighters that just launched that are under command of the fleet commander. And then we can tell our Hammerhead to move to position or whatever and do whatever. And of course, they're just going to escort the Hammerhead. You don't have to have them in a fleet to do this. But say we had another group of fighters that was following a different commander, we can command those two groups separately now. And that's something we couldn't do before without broadcasting to all ships in sector. And then I have a whole bunch of other corvettes down here that, they're not part of the fleet, so I can do other things with them. And with the fleet ships, they're not locked in the system. So I can tell all these Y-Wings to broadcast to all ships in the sector, so this is independent of the fleet. Tell them to just follow me. It's a very loose system. So you see they all broke off the Hammerhead, and they're all coming to me. So they're not locked into the fleet. You can tell them to do whatever you want. You can still broadcast normally. You can tell them to escort the ships or to dock somewhere. You can tell them to individually go do things. So we'll tell this one to go dock at the military outpost. And you can even fly them without any issue. So now I'm flying one of the X-Wings in the fleet. It's not messing with the fleet in any other way. And there are no issues. But you can go to the Hammerhead's command console and at any time broadcast to all the fleet ships to have them all do something. So it's a very good grouping system. Please use this instead of wings. I know some people love wings, and that's perfectly fine, but I highly recommend using the fleet system. It's a lesser known hidden gem within the menus that not a lot of people know about. So, broadcast to all fleet ships, and you have this command console. So that is something to consider. You do have the special fleet commands. I've never actually used these because I've only used the Mayhem versions. I've never actually used the LitCube versions, but I don't know exactly what these do, but they should command all the fleet ships to do everything. But I see no reason why you shouldn't just use broadcast to all fleet ships. It gives you an extra degree of micromanagement that you couldn't otherwise achieve. Say, Fleet Commander, 21 ships, and 1 ship currently with the fleet. So if you want to use those commands that are in the menu, these commands, it only works for ships that are technically in the fleet. And so if you use the broadcast to all fleet ships, it'll work no matter what. This one always works. No matter where the ships are, no matter what they're doing, they'll all get the command. If you want to use the special fleet commands in tab 3 up here, it only works if they're with the fleet. Now I'm assuming this works like Mayhem. If you call to arms, now you see 21 ships currently with the fleet. All the ships are going to form up on the fleet commander. Now the fleet commander still has the move position order that I gave it, right? I'm going to tell the fleet commander to follow me, and all the ships are rallied with the fleet commander. They're still with the fleet. So at any time you can command the fleet commander like any other ship. You can tell it to do stuff, and its fleet that it is technically commanding. Remember, it's just a grouping system. They're still going to do things with it. So anyway, now that they're technically with the fleet, whatever, however it can, after you've done the rally call to arms, then you can use these commands, and I guess you can do patrol sectors. That's not something. So here's what I don't get. I mean, you can do patrol sectors and all that, but instead of patrol sectors, you can just tell the fleet commander combat patrol, right? Well, I don't have patrol command software, but if it was on here, and then everything following it would just follow it, and you don't have to do it as a fleet. But what I think this lets you do, and I know this is how it works in Mayhem, I don't know if this is how it works in LitQ, is say I have 3 quasars in the fleet and 100 fighters, right? Normally we would have to home base all the fighters to each quasar individually. What I think Call to Arms does is if you have 3 quasars, so say 1 quasar is the commander, 2 quasars are just in the fleet, but they're assigned to the lead quasar as the commander, and all 100 fighters are also in the fleet assigned to the lead quasar as commander. If you issue the Call to Arms, I think all of the fighters will be automatically home based among the 3 carriers automatically. So all you have to do is just assign your fighters to a fleet and then issue Call to Arms. I know that's how it works in Mayhem. It's an excellent system in that mod, but I'm not entirely sure if that's how it works in LitQ, but it's worth a try if someone wants to pursue the fleet system in greater detail. This can be a complete substitute for MLCC as well if you want to give manual commands to ships. You can use this alongside MLCC. And I really like how it's a very loosely organized system, unlike the wings. It's a much better system. Another thing that I don't see a lot of players doing, and I just don't understand why, is bring your Corvettes with you as you travel the universe. Corvettes and up. I know that in vanilla, you don't want to bring your ships because they die so easily and they're so hard to manage, but just bring them along with you as you travel the universe, and you will be able to take on combat missions that your personal ship cannot handle on its own. So I have 2 hammerheads here, and they have the auto jump setting with a minimum jump range of 1, so they don't jump to the same sector and get all confused. And they also have a bunch of energy cells. And these energy cells, if I were to jump like, a lot of sectors away, this jump is only 90 energy cells. And they have, a couple thousand? 2,500, so their fuel is going to last a very long time. And you don't have to be fancy. You don't have to use automatic resupply. Just, every time you capture a Corvette from salvage, just fill it up with energy cells and add it to the escort that is following your player ship. It helps if your escorts are faster than you. But say I go to another sector. Now this is where fighters most likely can't follow you. When you want to do combat missions with all your fighters, just have them all follow you and only do combat missions in the area where the fighters are based, so you don't have to do big jumps. And that way you don't have to put jump drives on all your fighters. But as you just go about your business in the universe, and of course there happens to be pirates right here, just have your ships follow you, and they'll automatically follow me everywhere I go. and they'll be here when I need them for combat missions. I don't think their turrets are even set.
Command accepted. Command accepted.
But anyway, let's say I'm just going about here. I'm going to go buy something in this other sector. I'll just have my corvettes follow me. Now they may be distracted by those pirates. That was a very bad example.
Profit.
Oh, we got one. Let's see, where's the other one? Let's see, escort, protect me. But yeah, as you go about your business, just have ships with you. Something most people need to get used to that I see people still not doing is in LitCube, please bring other ships with you. It's not about just the player ship, because your player ship is very, very weak on its own. Just like all other ships, you have to rely on numbers in LitCube. So say I was to take a combat mission, you know, I'll have all my ships with me. You don't want to do anything alone. Always have your ships with you. And say you need to refuel one, well, no big deal. You know, just find one that isn't jumping. And you don't have to refuel them often, but say this one's empty. I have the fuel shuttle. Something I forgot to cover in my fuel shuttle review is if you have a ship targeted like this, such that it appears down here, if you hit the fuel shuttle button, the fuel shuttle is going to come in. Let's see, where is it? There's my fuel shuttle.
Transfer.
And it's going to refill the ship you have selected. So if I check the hammerhead now, wow, okay, 500. Let's go ahead and set these as high as they possibly can go. Because ships that are following the player, right, you might as well use all of their excess energy cell, all of their excess cargo bay for extra jump fuel. Jump fuel is extremely cheap, and you're not using the cargo bay for anything else, so you might as well just have them follow you around everywhere you go throughout the game. And, you know, if the fleet gets too big, you don't have to bring them all with you. You can have a home base, like a trade station, $10 million for a trade station. It's, you know, very cheap. Just like you could buy 2 of those for the price of 1 Corvette. A trade station will likely dock 10 Corvettes. You can just have 10 extra Corvettes sitting at a trade station, and when you need the extra reinforcements, just select the trade station, broadcast to all ships, select M6, M7 ships, and tell them to follow you, and they will automatically jump in and back you up. It's kind of like MLCC Light. It's a very good way of managing your ships. That way you can pin it. So let's pretend my mining outpost, this is the Rebel Recruit start. Rebel Cell Leader. Let's pretend my mining outpost over here is my base. Just a station whose only purpose is to house corvettes that are ready to jump in and help the player. This is something you can do without MLCC, and it's a very smart way to manage a fleet. So if you don't want to have them follow you, or if you want to have additional ships but you just have too many following you, you can pin it up here to the monitor by hitting Shift 2 or Shift 1. And then you can just click on it, hit L, landed ships, pretend you have 10 corvettes here ready to go, just broadcast to all landed ships, follow me, and they will all jump in and you will have a fleet. And then you can broadcast to all ships, return home, and they will all jump right back to their base and refuel automatically because you have their jump drive settings. And the ships that are in your migrant fleet, like these hammerheads, they're not going to have a home base, so they're just going to keep following you. So reinforcements on the go. And M6s and up. M6s are great for this. Corvettes are perhaps my favorite class because they're very versatile. And you can of course put jump drives on fighters too, but they don't have a lot of range for jump drive fuel, and they're often not worth all of the costs for all the jump drives. So once you get a carrier like the Quasar, you can have a Quasar docked somewhere and just call it in whenever you need it, and launch all the fighters or broadcast launch ships. But try this out. This is a good way to play the game. Just have your ships following you at all times, and you can see with the shield formation there in front of me. And they're not likely going to collide, if anything, because of the bounce script. So there really isn't much to worry about, but you'll always have these ships with you as you just go about your business throughout the game. And the quantum jump gate is highly recommended by me, but you don't need it. They'll just jump to the gates. But please try out the system where you have your ships at a trade station somewhere, and that trade station just has them on standby, and you just click and hit launch, broadcast to all ships, follow me, and then we'll just jump in. That is actually the basis of how MLCC works. That's the general idea. So I know I've been talking a lot about carriers, but carriers are in fact completely optional. They are not needed at all to project fighter power all over the place in the galaxy. So the biggest drawback to fighters for the early game that a lot of players run into is that, well, if I want to go fight somewhere across the map, I can't bring my fighters with me. I need to get a carrier. That is entirely false. All you need is to put a jump drive on all of your ships, and the cost of putting a jump drive on all your fighters is a lot less than buying a carrier, and it's a lot less of a hassle. However, the only issue is that not a lot of fighters have a lot of cargo bay, so they can't carry a lot of jump fuel. This problem can be solved with supply command software. So supply command software is an obscure upgrade that not a lot of people know about, and definitely a lot of people don't use. But most Star Wars sectors sell it. So if we look at the Galactic Empire sector, they sell supply command software, and it's about 200,000 credits, so it's fairly cheap. It's extremely cheap for how good it is. Basically, you're only going to need 1 or 2 in your entire playthrough on your freighters. So put it on a freighter and put a transporter device on that freighter too. So here is our supply ship. It is a TS class. It's the new YV-929 freighter, and in it we have a transporter device, and we have the supply command software, and those are the only 2 really important ones. The ship is set to autojump, and if we look at its freight, it only has the autojump energy cells with it. So back to this TIE bombers I'm using as an example. So normally you would have a quasar carry all your TIE bombers with you, but say I was up here, I don't have a quasar, but all my TIE bombers have jump drives. So I have them organized into a fleet. They're all template outfitted, so they have jump drives, but remember, fleets don't require templates. You can put a massive mix of a whole bunch of different fighters that you salvage together, all in a fleet, all with jump drives. And what the fleet is doing now is I issued the call to arms command, so we have 48 ships currently with the fleet. The TIE Bomber Commander, which is the one that I designated as the commander. Remember, any ship can be a commander, and they don't have to all have one type of ship in a fleet. It's just a loose organization of ships, but it's a much better system than wings. All I have to do is tell the commander to follow me, and then the other ships will follow the commander. So there's the commander, and then here come the other ships. So we can use jump drives to bring fighters wherever we want. And all I had to do was tell the commander to follow me, and then once the battle starts, I can tell the commander to go to fleet ships, attack all enemies, or use some of the special fleet commands in number 3. So now we have the ability to project fighters across the galaxy without using MLCC, without even using a home base. We don't even have a station that these are relying on. They're just following their commander, and they all have auto jump. The only issue is they're going to run out of fuel eventually. So if we check their fuel, 134 energy cells, they've used some up. They're all set to resupply 200, and most fighters probably can't restock that many, but there's no harm in setting it high and just letting the energy cells max out your cargo capacity, because most fighters do not have the huge cargo bay that a TIE bomber does. But anyway, if we wanted to say, okay, we're done fighting in Space Weave Drift, let's go down to Perpetual Sin, and let's have the fighters follow us. They're going to need more jump fuel, because that is a huge jump, and most fighters aren't going to be able to make that. So to refuel this entire fleet, we can't really use the quick shuttle. So the quick shuttle, the fuel shuttle, will only resupply 1 ship at a time. So it's great for resupplying the player. I can just hit my button, the quick shuttle will jump in and beam energy cells to me, but we can't do it for the whole fleet. That is where the supply command ship comes in. Now, another thing we could do is we could find a station that docks infinite fighters that also sells energy cells, such as a military outpost like this. See, docking fighter infinite, and it sells energy cells. We could just tell the entire fleet by going to Fleet Commander, broadcast to all fleet ships, dock, and then select the military outpost, and they'll all dock and get energy cells and be awaiting. Then they'll be waiting for me to call them in somewhere by telling the commander to follow me. And that's one way to do it, but the easiest way is with the supply command software. So let's look at our ship. Our supply ship is currently based at an equipment dock of ours that has a whole bunch of energy cells it can use. And it currently, let's see, the ship currently has only its fuel. So if we tell the ship to go to special, we'll see that we have these supply commands in here. So 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 6. 3, 4, 5, and 6 are supply commands. And these are really cool. So you can actually tell a supply command equipped ship to template outfit other ships of yours that are just floating in space. So if we had a TIE bomber floating in space that we had just captured, it doesn't have shields, it doesn't have weapons, it's just a random TIE bomber we got, we could tell the supply command ship to template outfit that bomber as one of our equipped bombers, and it would bring the equipment to do it. So here's where you select the template. This is the template that I was using earlier, TIE bomber with jump drive. And then down here is where you select the ship. And then you can supply an entire formation. So pretend we had all of our TIE bombers here that were just bare bones, no equipment. We'd select yes, we'd select the commander. And the way supply entire formation works is a formation is defined as ships following another ship. So all the ships following the TIE bomber commander are a formation. So basically, this means whatever ship you select down here will also supply their followers. So this template right here has electromagnetic plasma cannons, 25 megajoule shields, and a few missiles and energy cells. So it would bring all of those from its home base or from its inventory, and it would put them on the ships according to the template. So this is an interesting way to template outfit out and about without even having a station. So you don't even need a station to do template outfitting. You can just have the supply ship do it. But we're not going to do that. You can use rearm ships to bring missiles to your fighters, so you don't have to have them all return home. And then you can use supply ships to have your ship. I think this one brings fighter drones and just fighter drones and maybe laser towers or something else you could set to automatically resupply. The one we're going to use is refuel ships. Supply entire formation. We're going to find our TIE bomber commander. So that is this one right here in Space Fleet Drift. It turns yellow once you select it. So this one is selected, and then we're going to hit supply. So if we look at our supply ship now, it has all these energy cells. It grabbed those on its own to come supply our massive line of fighters up here. And it's going to come do that. It's going to jump in automatically. And I believe it already transferred them. Yes, as you can see, the energy cells just went down. So it distributed them among... It already distributed them among all of the TIE fighters that needed them. So the supply ship has finished its job. If we look at the TIE fighters, 134, 134. Okay, so they didn't all get energy cells. 534. See, a UT just jumped in. 534, 534. Okay, so it had enough cargo space to resupply all of the bombers down here, but it didn't have enough to do these up here. So I'm curious as to actually whether the supply ship is going to return and finish the job. Ignore the other freighters jumping in. Those are just universe traders. Okay, our supply ship jumped out. Let's see what it's going to do. It's returning home to its equipment dock. And of course, you can always use a TL or some other massive ship as a supply ship. It's basically a fuel shuttle on steroids, but you don't get the hotkey for it. Okay, so I guess if it didn't have enough cargo bay to resupply the entire fleet in one go, it's just going to return home. So we'll want to get a ship with a bigger cargo bay to do this, or we will tell our TIE bombers to a lower jump threshold. So right now they're set to resupply 200 jumps, which is a lot of energy cells. So let's just have it do it again. So special, refuel ships, TIE bomber commander, and the reason it knows to resupply all the TIE fighters is because they're all following this TIE bomber commander. And let's hit supply. Let's see what happens. Cannot resupply. Oh, completed refueling. So it thinks they're already all refueled. I guess there was only one or two that didn't. Okay, never mind. I must have missed it. If we look at the energy cells, which is the third wear in the freight bay of all the TIE bombers, It's 534, which is the exact amount that they all need to have 200 jumps worth of energy cells. So, I'm sorry, I must have missed it. The ship did do the job. It transferred energy cells to all of the individual TIE bombers so they all have what they need. So now, we can tell the commander to follow me, and its ships are going to follow it. And wherever we go, the TIE bombers are going to follow us. So now, we have a fighter wing that we can deploy and bring on missions all over the galaxy. And we don't even have a carrier. We don't need a carrier. And they don't even have a home base. So there's the commander, and here's all the fighters, and whenever we need fuel, we'll just tell our supply ship to do its thing. And that is how you can use fighters without a carrier. And we can easily command them too, since they're in a fleet. Broadcast all fleet ships attack all enemies, or we can broadcast all ships in sector. Remember, they don't have to be in a fleet to use the supply command. You can, if you want to resupply all the ships in a sector without having to have them in a fleet, you can just broadcast to all ships in sector, select all ships, tell them to follow the player ship, so tell them to follow me, and then tell the supply ship to resupply the player ship and all ships in formation. Because if everyone's following me, they're all in my formation, which I believe I have set as X delta, so they'll form an X behind me. Yeah, it's more or less an X. But anyway, if I tell it to resupply me now, it will do all the ships in the sector that are following me because I broadcast to all ships. So it's a very cool remote resupply thing you can do, and no stations are involved. And you can also use it for missiles, fighter drones, and for template outfitting. So as I was describing earlier, and I'm sorry this is all over the place, I don't bother writing scripts, it's too much of a hassle. But the best you can get without MLCC is a home base like this, Rebel Trading Station, a cheap station. If I go to landed ships, first of all, info, it has 10 out of 10 landed ships, and landed at it are a bunch of these Corvettes that I have gotten, just random Corvettes from salvage that I bought, hide them from property menu, or just other means. They're just a bunch of random Corvettes, and instead of having them follow me everywhere or whatever, I have them ready at a moment's notice. This station is full of energy cells, and easily you could, use one of those 10 docking slots as a dock agent to keep this stocked of energy cells, or heck, home base them at a solar power plant. I know most people aren't going to use solar power plants, and they're probably going to use Saturn complex hubs. But say I'm at some random part of the galaxy, it doesn't matter where I am. I'm just going to click on this trading station, L, go to one Corvette, broadcast to all ships, and just follow me. And because they have auto jump, they're just going to jump in. And now that all the ships have rallied, I can just tell them, broadcast all ships in the sector, M6, and then attack and go from there. So this is how you can have a fleet accessible all over the universe. And when you want to return them home, just broadcast to all ships in the sector. Oh, and I should also mention, they have their auto jump, so if they go below 50% shields, which is what I've set, they're automatically going to jump back to this station that they're home based at. So if I tell them now, so I broadcast to all ships, say we just won the battle, M6s, and return home. They are all going to jump right back to the trade station, and if we go to the sector map, we put it right near the gate in the safe sector, and if we go back to landed, they're all ready to go. They just refueled because the station is full of energy cells, which shouldn't be too hard to set up. And then we can just call them in next time we have a big combat mission or next time we're in danger. So say there's a whole bunch of pirates down by the south gate. We'll just head down there and click on our station, broadcast to all landed ships, and follow me. I mean, there's a few menus you have to go through, but it's an excellent MLCC free system. It's very simple, it's easy to understand, and it lets you project power anywhere at any time very easily. Now the issue is, it's only 10 ships, right? So you can get a base like the McCallum dock, the Tanzari station. There's a few stations in the game that can dock infinite Corvettes. And then you can have a huge base right, with like, so this cheap station's only limited to 10. You could have a huge base that has, infinite big ship docking. So you can have all your corvettes there and only have to do one broadcast. But the point is, you're going to get capital ships later, and then you'll have to broadcast to all your different docks and have them all come to you. But actually, just talking now, I just thought of a better solution to that, and that is, so you can only dock 2 capital ships per equipment dock, normal equipment docks. If, say, you have 5 equipment docks and 10 capital ships, you don't want to go to each equipment dock, broadcast to all ships, follow me, to rally all your capital ships in a sector at once. What you can do is you can have a fleet commander, as I previously explained, set all of the capital ships to a fleet commander, and you don't even have to have them follow the fleet commander. The fleet commander is just an ease of menu access. So go to your fleet commander, broadcast to all fleet ships, follow me, right? So they all jump into the sector. So this way you're rallying all your capitals to your location in one command. And that's the fleet commander that they're all assigned to, even though they all have different home bases at different docks. You will tell them to follow you. They'll all jump in. After the battle, you can broadcast to all fleet ships and tell them to return home. And because every 2 ships has a different home base, they'll automatically know where to go. And then you can return all your ships to their home base, which are each station has 2 capital ships. So the 10 ships will know which of the 5 stations to go to, and therefore you can rally all of your capitals in with one command, and you can send them all back with one command. And the fleet commander can just be any one of those 10 ships. That's an idea of how to organize your fleet. I hope that was easy to understand. I know I don't have that set up to demonstrate, but I'm thinking of any alternatives to MLCC that I possibly can before I go into detail on the actual MLCC. So this station, right, the little base that has all the corvettes that you can jump in at any time, you can put those corvettes in a fleet, the fleet commander system. Remember, they're not locked in that system. You can still tell them to do whatever you want at any time. In fact, say you have this one base, but you also have the 5 equipment docks that have the capital ships. You can you can put all the ships home based at the Rebel Trading Station and all the capitals in the same fleet, but all have their individual home bases. That way you can rally the whole fleet to your location with one command, have them do whatever, right? Attack all enemies, whatever they need to do. And then you can broadcast to all fleet ships, return home, and they will all go to the respective stations. And they'll be refilled and they'll be waiting for the next time you call them. And that is basically the vanilla implementation of what MLCC is. At least the home-based system. So MLCC uses docks just like that, where you have ships waiting at docks, and then they jump in, and then they do MLCC commands. So this is where MLCC gets more advanced. MLCC can do much more advanced commands than broadcast all ships, attack all enemies. And that's basically, so the limiting factor of using vanilla systems, even though you can be just as organized as MLCC through the use of home bases and fleet commanders, as I've explained, the limitation is that the only thing you really have to work with is broadcast to all ships, attack all enemies, right? Or broadcast to all ships, protect, or broadcast to all ships, move to position or follow. And those are tedious to do, and there's not really much diversity you can do. You can't have Tartans attacking fighters while the Star Destroyers focus on more appropriate targets. Everyone's just going to attack everything indiscriminately. Of course, the turrets are going to be following their own commands, which you'll have set up yourself. But as for main guns and fighters, they're not going to know what to do or what's best for them. And that's where MLCC comes in. So you need to use MLCC for that. So I'm finally going to get to MLCC. So let's turn our station. So our Rebel Trading Station that has the 10 corvettes that we've been using as a quick summon base, we're going to turn it into an MLCC dock. So before I do this, important, do not put MLCC on a dock that you use for any other purpose. Don't put it on your mining bases. Don't put it on your other equipment docks. Don't put it on your UT home bases or any station that makes money. because MLCC, the software that you put on the station, will take over any ship's home base to it and assimilate them into the MLCC network. So have dedicated stations that are only for MLCC and have those separate from the rest of your stations. So we're going to set this up as an MLCC station. So I typically have a naming convention is where all MLCC stations, I put that in parentheses in front of it, and I'll call this, so this is an Argon trading station, so ATS1. And so to actually install it, you need to go to Advanced Command Console. This is where you set up direct deposit, and you will hit Install MLCC. Now there is a price you have to pay. It's always about 2.5 million. I don't know why this exists or who you're actually paying, but it should be pretty trivial by the time you're setting up MLCC. Remember, you can use those previous systems I talked about before you even get here, and those will serve you quite well. So you don't have to do this early game. This is a mid to late game thing. So anyway, MLCC is now installed on this station. And if we look at our landed ships, they're starting to be renamed by MLCC. So that's another thing. If you're one of those people that likes to name your ships, especially your capital ships with special names or something, you shouldn't use MLCC, because MLCC will rename your ships to security, and then the name of the ship, and then the name of the station. It uses that naming convention. That way you know where the ships are from, where they're based, and what they are. So now they're MLCC ships. So what does that let us do? We can still command them normally. We can tell any MLCC ship to, do whatever. Let's go dock at the trading station, and it'll go do that. It's kind of a loose system like the vanilla fleet commanders, which is an amazing system too. But it's a loose system where it's not like a wing where you can only command all of them and the ships have no individual freedom within that wing. You can give manual commands to MLCC ships at any time, even canceling their MLCC commands that they're running, and everything will be fine. That's actually encouraged. You can do that. And so let's open the MLCC menu. There are two buttons in the controls that you need to have for MLCC. There is MLCC console and go code. The go code is the single button you press that tells all the ships to spring into action and execute all their commands, all their battle commands. And the the menu is what you use for everything else. So let's open the menu. This is the MLCC menu. One of the most important buttons here is retreat. What retreat does is it just tells every single ship that is in the MLCC network, and that is defined by any ship that is home-based to a station that has MLCC installed on it. And I forgot to mention, MLCC only works with corvettes and higher. So TMs, fighters, freighters will not work with MLCC. There is a patch somewhere out on the EagleSoft forums to make TMs work with MLCC, but you really don't need that. There is a carrier system for MLCC using fighters, but I'll get to that later. That is way later. For now, we're just setting up our first station with corvettes, and that is it. So our ships are going about their business. They're doing whatever, right? This one, let's summon this one to me. So we have 8 ships docked. We have 1 ship following me. Here it is in the sector. This is an MLCC ship. And we have another one that's going to dock at a random trade station somewhere. So when I issue the retreat command, all MLCC ships across all MLCC stations, so we only have 1 station now, but if we had 2, it would broadcast to all those ships too. It tells them to return home. So it's going to jump out, and if we go back to Montalar, we can see this one that was going to the trade station is returning home, and this one is also returning home. So this is why you need to put the stations close to the gate, or if you have quantum jump gate extension on all your ships, put it directly at the center. That way they'll return home, and because it's out of sector, they'll just instantly dock. And that way you can summon them again. Because you might be summoning and retreating and re-summoning and re-retreating a lot during a single battle. And the speed at which you can do that is limited by, the travel time between the gate or wherever your station is before they could get back. Because you can't summon them until they've docked at the station again. So let's go over how to summon ships. So since they're at the station. We can give them manual commands, but let's go over the actual MLCC commands. So if I go to configuration, real quick, restock, what restock does is it tells all ships in MLCC stations to undock and redock at that station. So that will automatically, if you set energy cells, they dock at the station, and then the station gets energy cells between the time they dock and when you need them again. They're not going to refuel unless they only refuel missiles, fighter drones, and energy cells, which you can set to automatically resupply. Let's see. So if we go to the resupply menu, here's where we can set them to automatically resupply missiles, automatically resupply drones, and in the main command console is where they automatically resupply energy cells. That will only happen when they dock. So if you want to just restock everyone, just issue the restock command. It's not something you need to use often, but that's what that one does. There are two more commands, intercept and assist. I don't actually use these. I never have. I've just never looked into them. Let's see. But it has to do with complaints that are automatically flagged by your traders and agents, I think, and it lets them automatically respond to threats around the galaxy. But I've never used MLCC for that, so I won't be able to explain exactly what those do. There's more information on LitCube's wiki for that. And before I get to the configuration, the Dockware Manager. So for a normal station, you can set up the Dockware Manager to automatically resupply freighters and all that for all your wares. But for an MLCC station, you'll see Ware Management handled by MLCC. So the Dockware Manager menu is controlled by MLCC. You can't change it yourself. The thresholds page is blank, and this is usually the main page where you set everything. So all you can do is set sources. And these are filled out based on what your ships are set to resupply. So right now, my ships are only set to resupply energy cells. If I told one of my ships to resupply missiles, it would be added to this MLCC Dockware Manager for the station. So you should have a dock agent or a freighter, depending on how exactly you're planning to obtain these things. Actually, most likely a freighter. This is LitCube's universe. So you should likely have a freighter, and then you set your source. I don't have any stations set up in this example, but any person who's setting up MLCC should probably already have an energy cell station, because you don't want to have to deal with credits and funding for the purchasing of energy cells from an MLCC station. You just want to have a freighter. Or you could ignore this and have a courier set that up. I think I went over all that in a different logistics tutorial. But anyway, the wares will automatically pop up on here based on what MLCC deems that the ships need for automatic resupply. So this is how you set your station to automatically restock energy cells. The threshold, unfortunately, will automatically be set. I don't like that because sometimes it goes a little high, in my opinion, based on what everything is set to restock, especially if you're kind of starved for missiles and all your ships are set to resupply missiles. Your dock agents will be fighting over them. But anyway, that's the Dockware Manager. Let's configure what the ships will actually do, because that's what's important. So when you add a ship to MLCC, that is done by home basing it to a station that has MLCC. And you can see in the configuration menu, this will control what they actually do during a battle. So all of these have tasks unassigned. And the way MLCC works is all ships of the same class can be assigned, the same ship type can be assigned to the same thing. So if I have 10 Tartan Patrol Cruisers in my MLCC network, or 20 or 1,000, I only have to set up the behavior for the ship type Tartan Patrol Cruiser, and all Tartan Patrol Cruisers will follow that exact thing. Now, because my fleet is really diverse, I'm going to have to do this a lot of different times, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what happens. So we're setting up the commands for the first ship type, which is the X3AP Phantom, which is one of the 10 corvettes we have. Interceptions, I've never used this, remember, but this, if you enable this, it will let it use the interceptions feature in the menu. Because remember, the thing popped up and said no ships for interceptions. It's because none of these were set like this. But so you have 3 orders, and the final mission will be retreat, and it should probably always be retreat. But the primary order is what, so when you issue the go code, all ships are going to execute the primary order. And typically, for most ships, that's going to be assault. And here's where you can specify what they attack. So let's say the X-70B Phantom, we want it to go around killing all the fighters and only focus on the fighters. So we'll set assault fighters as the first order. So say we have a second order, and that is to attack all the corvettes. The second order will not happen until the first order is no longer valid. So the way the first order no longer gets valid is if all the fighters are dead, or there are no fighters. So the X-70B is going to go around killing all the fighters. It's automatically going to retarget and find new fighters as it kills them until all fighters in the whole sector are gone, and then it's going to move on to the secondary order, which is attack all the enemy corvettes in the sector. And then say all the enemy corvettes are dead. After that, we'll have it just target ships. So this means everything. It will just go after all the fighters are dead, it's going to move on to the corvettes, and after all the corvettes are dead, it's just going to attack everything. And then after everything is dead, the final mission, retreat. So that means after everything is dead in this sector, it's just going to automatically return home. And we don't need this because we can just issue the retreat command at any time for any reason and send them all home, even in the middle of a battle. I've done that a lot. But this will automatically jump them out. It's just kind of a convenience thing. If you want a fourth order, you can have them do that instead. And you did notice you can't have any attack orders here because this is assuming all the ships are already dead. So you can have escorts. And that's another thing you can do, escorts. So when it's saying escort class M2, what this ship is going to do is it's going to escort all friendly M2s. When I say friendly, that only means ships under my control. And they don't have to be ships in the MLCC network. So say I have a Star Destroyer, the M2 version, this Imperial 2 class Star Destroyer, and I have my Star Destroyer in my sector that I summon the MLC ships in, and it's not the Star Destroyer is not in a fleet, it's not in a wing, it's not home based anywhere, it's not in MLCC, it's just set to follow me, right? It's only set to follow me, so it's just a ship off the grid. If I have the MLCC ships on M2 Protect, they're going to find that Star Destroyer and protect it, or they will attack same, attack nearest, follow, protect, right? You can have them do whatever. And if that Star Destroyer jumps out, or if the Star Destroyer is killed, right, then the first order is no longer valid, and then they'll move on to assault all corvettes, which is what my second thing is. And I know this is, you can customize exactly what your fleet does. You're kind of setting up their AI before the battle happens. And once you hit the MLCC go code, all ships will begin their primary order, right? And they'll move on until the final mission. So they'll just keep doing MLCC stuff until the final mission is valid and do that, which will basically mean keep fighting until all ships are dead. Or if you can interrupt it manually by giving them manual commands or issuing the retreat order. So at any time, say the ship is so this X-70B, it's in the middle of escorting something. And this could also be Star Destroyers in the MLCC network. So any M2, right? Or you can do capitals. This means M2, M1, M7, the player, other ships that you specify in your fleet. There's also carrier and bomber, but we'll get to those later because a Corvette can't do either of those. But to be simple, let's just do fighters and then ships because I have to demonstrate this in a second and we don't have a Star Destroyer. So as I was saying, if the ship is currently running MLCC scripts, which means it's going through these orders, and I give the ship a manual command. So in the middle of a battle, if I tell all the MLCC ships, broadcast all ships, follow me, they'll do it, they'll follow me, right? They're not going to be restricted by MLCC saying, no, you have to do the MLCC stuff. So they'll follow me, however, it will cancel all of this MLCC stuff. So the only way, and then you can't issue the go command again. So the only way to get them doing this is to summon them with MLCC and then issue the go command. And then if you interrupt it or if they return home, they can't do this again until they're summoned and issue the go command again. So even once you break them out of this loop, once you unlink them from the system, you can still issue the retreat command. Remember, you can issue the retreat command, which is this, at any time, and that will send them all home. And you can only summon them. So to summon ships, use the assist command. And we only have rally standard now. And so let's summon our X3AP Phantom. So there'll be a list of yes, no's down here. And real quick, before I get into this, let me just assign everything else. Sorry, this is all over the place again. So assault, fighters, and ships. We'll just do that for all of these. And this is why you should probably, I mean, there's no reason. The only reason is that you have to do this for every ship type. So if you have 10 of the same ship type, you only have to do it once, and all of those ships will follow it. But say you wanted different corvettes doing different things, that means you can just use 2 different ship classes to do that. So you'll notice that all of the ships all have their orders here. And you'll see carrier type has shown up here. I'll have to get to this later, but basically these 3 corvettes have docking capacity. So we can do additional things there. MLCC missile ROEs, rules of engagement. That's a special missile behavior that ships can do. Again, I'll cover this later because it gets way more advanced. But for now, all of our ships, the orders are kill all fighters and then kill all ships. So they're going to ignore all of the capital ships and other things, only focusing on fighters. And then once all the fighters are dead, they're going to move on to the secondary order, which is attack all. Now remember, on top of all of this, doesn't apply to turrets. Remember, turrets on a ship, like my ship, only follow their turret commands. So while the ship is actively seeking out fighters, the turrets are still doing attack all enemies. And sure, we can set them to attack fighters, but so say the ships are finished their fighters and now they're attacking Star Destroyers, the turrets will still be set to this. So it only applies to the main guns, and M6s and M7s, fighters and frigates, are typically heavily armored in the main gun department. So remember, turrets, so if you see a corvette shooting turret fire off at a ship that you didn't tell it to an MLCC, remember, turrets just do whatever they want. You're only dictating what the ship flies at and shoots at with the main guns. So let's demonstrate this finally, shall we? Alright, so I found a good sector here. It's got a bunch of corvettes and a bunch of fighters. This is something our force can handle. So I'm going to jump to the south gate, and then I'm going to summon them. So to summon MLCC, you open the menu, assist, and then hit rally standard. So only ships that are set to yes here will actually show up. And you can save grouping. So we'll call this, right, first half. And then we'll copy the new group, second half. And then new group, full fleet. So first half will be these, second half will be these, and a full fleet will be this. You don't have to use these groups, but as you get lots and lots of more ships, you can see you can easily switch it, and you can summon only what you want to summon at a time. Normally, you can probably just summon the entire fleet at a time, but as your fleet gets more diverse with more specialized roles, you're going to want to diversify and summon different parts of the fleet at different times. So I hit summon rally standard, so 10 ships are responding, and they don't have the quantum jump gate extension, so I'm just using a gate here. And they'll all jump in through the gate. Now their turrets are firing. They're not actually attacking you. Only their turrets are firing. Let me get out of the way here. We'll wait till the rest of the fleet jumps in. We have 10 total corvettes. Only 5 are in sector now. Okay, all our ships are here. So they're not doing anything. They're just sitting there. Now once we give the go command, so I'm going to hit it now, you'll hear command accepted. Now all the ships are going to go mop up all the fighters, and then they're going to kill all the corvettes, and then once that's done, they should be on retreat, and then they'll leave. Now remember, I could hit B or the MLCC main menu and hit retreat at any time, and they'll all just jump back home to whatever base they're home based at. And of course, their turrets are not following this command, so you'll kind of see shots going everywhere. But know that most corvettes have lots of main guns. And you may be wondering why you didn't see all of the ships jump in that epic formation in front of me, right? They all had to use a gate. Shoot. Don't want to actually die during this. That is because we used Rally Standard. When you use Rally Standard, the ships will only be able to... Rally Standard only lets the ships use gates, or if they have Quantum Jump Gate, the center of the sector. Once you get a jump beacon in your inventory, so if you have a jump beacon in your player ship's inventory, which we do not, you'll unlock an option, an assist called Rally Jump Beacon. And that lets ships, MLCC ships with the Quantum Jump Gate extension, it will allow them to jump in the giant circle in front of you, which is that iconic view of the fleet jumping in that LitCube's universe is known for. And that can be used to devastating effect because it allows you to instantly drop a massive fleet in a concentrated location where they can all focus fire at once. And we have auto jump set up, so as this one tartan has gone below its shield threshold, it's going to automatically jump away. That is not an MLCC thing, so regular ships in a wing and a fleet commander, or whatever grouping you want, or just ships that are not in a network, they will be able to auto jump away too. So that's not MLCC, that's just a standard feature. Now notice we have a Corvette left, but we also have a fighter at the top. All our ships are flying past this enemy Corvette. I know they're pummeling it to death, but if you notice, none of our ships are pointing at it, and none of them are firing their main guns at it. They're flying past it, because they're trying to kill this fighter up here. So the turrets on all these Corvettes are set to attack all enemies, so the turrets are what are actually doing the work. That's important to know. They're following their first order. And once this fighter leaves the sector, which it should pretty soon, it's headed towards the gate. I think it is. Oh, it's attacking something. Okay. Oh, it's attacking our satellite. I'm gonna jump up there and kill it real quick so we can see the orders shift. Alright, so the fighter's dead. So now we can see all of our Corvettes are turning around. They're all turning, and now they're all going to kill this, because this is considered a ship, right? So now that all ships are destroyed, they are going to retreat, because that is the final directive. And there they go. They've all jumped away, and now they are all back. Let's see, Montalar is where I based them. You can see they're all returning, and if I try to summon them now, so assist Rally Standard, you'll see, well, okay, one ship responding. That's the Tartan that jumped away because it had low shield, so it's already back home. I'll issue retreat, so it doesn't actually jump. But only ships that are docked at their home base will be available for jumping. So that's why you want to put the stations as close to the gates or the center of the sector for Quantum Jump Gate, which I would say is highly recommended for all MLCC ships to have Quantum Jump Gate extension. So that way you can resummon them as quickly as you possibly can, so you don't have to wait for them to travel. So let me real quick show what the jump gate, the jump beacon looks like. So to get a jump beacon, you're going to need 10 million credits. So it's definitely not something you can get super early on in the game. And you're also going to need, I think, reputation rank 8 or 9 with one of the factions. So 8 or 9 with one of the factions, you're going to need reputation rank, 8 or 9, and then 10 million credits. So it's not something you can just easily get. But military outposts like this one will sell it, so jump beacon. They're also very useful to eject and use as a jump point, an arbitrary jump point. So if you have Saturn complex hubs in a cluster somewhere. Alright, so let's buy our jump beacon. Now that we have a jump beacon in our player ship's inventory, we can use the rally jump beacon feature. Now I don't actually know if this works without the quantum jump gate. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but let's try it anyway. So we have the rally jump beacon feature now. Let's hit it. 10 ships responding. They should all just jump in front of me if they don't need the quantum jump gate. Okay, so it worked. They don't need quantum jump gate. Now all the ships are sitting here. Remember, we can still give them manual commands at any time, If you give a ship a manual command when they're in this state is them awaiting the go code, then they will not be awaiting the go code anymore. And when you give the go command, nothing will really happen. But, so the next thing to do is we can give the go command. So we'll give that. So now they're looking for fighters. Okay, there's no fighters. Now they're looking for ships. Now there's no ships. So their last order is to retreat. And that is what they're going to do. So you don't have to use MLCC strictly as its features. You can use MLCC just for the summoning feature because it's very handy to be able to pop ships in exactly where you need them, right? So say you're in the middle of a dogfight and you're far away from the gates, so reinforcements aren't going to reach you in time. You just rally your jump beacon and bam, you have a bunch of ships all right here to save you, and then you can beam aboard one of those ships and jump your player ship back home somewhere so that you can continue the fight and save your player ship. The summoning feature alone is one of the best features MLCC has to offer, in addition to all the advanced escort things you can do for them. So now I'm going to cover some of the escort commands that you can do. So now I'm going to explain a little, it's not really an official thing, but it's a trick I like to call task forces. So this is using MLCC's escort system. So when you have a fleet commander or broadcast to all ships or however you're doing it without MLCC, the best you can do is tell all your ships to escort one target with the leader, right? But once the leader is killed or has to jump out, all those ships that are set to escort are going to say, oh no, we need to protect the leader, and they're going to jump after it, and follow it back home because it ran away because its shields were down. Or if it was destroyed, they're going to just scramble around and idle, or I don't know what the default is. But basically they can't handle the death of whatever their escort target is. So let's use MLCC to do something a little differently. So I added a new ship to MLC. Well, I don't know if I already had it, but I added 10 extra Hammerhead Corvettes at a new base in Y Alpha. I have in McCallum dock, which is one that lets you carry infinite big ships. So you probably just need one MLCC McCallum dock, which you can buy at Legends Home at the OTAS shipyard or at the Galactic Empire as well at the OTAS shipyard. Let's see. OTAS McCallum equipment dock. And real quick, the Starliner dock is a dock that can dock 9 capital ships, which is excellent as an MLCC home base. It's basically what it was designed for. So those are your 2 docks. You can use other docks as well, like the trade station, but these are the big ones. So anyway, Y Alpha added a new dock. It has 10 Hammerhead Corvettes. It has MLCC. They're all in the MLCC system. Oh, hold up. I don't think I actually home based them yet. So landed ships, home base, the McCallum dock. So now they should all be being renamed. So what I'm going to do with these hammerheads is I'm going to demonstrate my little trick, which is what I call task forces. There we go. They don't have to, their name doesn't have to happen yet for them to work in MLCC. So they'll still work in MLCC before the name takes effect. So if I go to my configuration menu, okay, task unassigned hammerhead. So I guess I didn't have one before. What we're going to assign the hammerhead to do is primary order escort. And this is where you can have different sets of ships escorting different targets, but I can pick M7, right? So I have 3 Nebulon frigates in this sector that I'm going to use as an example, but I'm going to just say capitals in general. So if I have bigger ships in my fleet than the Nebulons, they'll pick random capital ships to escort. And I'm going to do attack same. So what this does is whatever the capital ship is attacking, the corvettes are going to back it up and attack the same target. So they're basically beefing up the firepower of whatever capital ship they're escorting by adding their own firepower to that capital ship's attack. So this makes your capital ships way more effective. And of course, all the ships involved have turrets that are going to protect them from other things as well. You can do attack nearest, but that's a lot messier. So attack same, and then you should always leave a default attack ships, is what I like to do. So the only way that the primary order will be stopped is if there are no capitals left to escort. So say all of our capital ships jumped out. If we didn't put the secondary order, our hammerheads are going to be like, well, we're done escorting, so what's next? Final mission retreat. So then they'll just return home. We don't want that. So after, in the event that all the capital ships are gone, all of my capital ships are gone, they're just going to default to, okay, well now we're just going to attack all ships in the sector. So escort and assault. So we have 3 Nebulons in this sector, positioned here, here, and here. They are not home-based anywhere. They're not an MLCC. They're just 3 Nebulons that I have. And remember, MLCC doesn't discriminate when it's giving an escort command. If you tell it to escort capitals, it will only look for capitals that the that the player owns. They don't have to be MLCC capitals. Now, of course, if you have capitals in MLCC, it'll escort those too. It doesn't discriminate. So here's what I'm talking about. So let's assist. We can rally jump beacon now. We don't actually need the quantum jump gate on our ships to do it, but I still recommend getting the quantum jump gate because putting stations next to gates results in travel time when retreating, and putting them at the center of the sector will allow ships to retreat instantaneously. So anyway, we don't want the full fleet. We just want the hammerheads. And see, this is where I don't usually use groups because now I have to make another group for the hammerhead, and now my full fleet group is all messed up, so I'm just going to get rid of my groups. So it's just something personal preference. So I'm going to summon my hammerheads. Or let's summon a few others too, just to demonstrate the different orders. Remember, my other ships are set to attack all fighters and then attack all corvettes. There's always lag when they all spawn in. So now we have our 10 hammerheads and the other assorted ships. So when I give the go code, the hammerheads are going to find Nebulons and they will run the attack same command. The other ships are going to see that there's no enemies in the sector and be like, okay, well now let's attack all ships. They're not going to see any, so then they're going to retreat. So let's give the command. The hammerheads are going to move. The other ships are about to jump. Now remember, they're jumping because their orders are assault, assault, retreat, and there's nothing to assault. So they're leaving. The hammerheads are still here running MLCC. And we have 2 bases. So this is where you can have bases all over the place running MLCC. And they're all going to need their own dock agents for energy cells. But as you can see here on the map, they all broke off and evenly divided themselves among the Nebulons. And this is where I call them like little task forces. So even if the Nebulons are in MLCC, though they're MLCC ships running their own commands, we can still give them manual orders at any time. So let's tell this Nebulon to follow me. Let's bring it over here. It has an escort of hammerheads escorting it. And they're going to escort it, so they don't care what the Nebulon is doing. See, they're all in formation around it. It's pretty cool. They don't care what the Nebulon is doing. They're just going to escort it. And if I tell this Nebulon to, well, actually, let's kill it with the cheat menu. So destroyed. So we killed the Nebulon, right? The Nebulon's gone. These hammerheads are not going to go to their secondary order, which is assault ships, which would have passed directly to retreat. They're going to break off and go escort the remaining capital ships. So say that Nebulon had to retreat, right? Its shields got too low, it emergency jumped. The remaining hammerheads that were in its little task force are going to go join another task force. And then remember, whatever this Nebulon is attacking, the hammerheads are going to join in and also attack. So we're using MLCC for the hammerheads, and we're using free will Nebulons that they're off the grid. They're not in a fleet. They're not in MLCC. And you can do this for any capitals. So if we have capitals in MLCC, and we have, there's so many things you can do. We have all those other corvettes set to do other things. We have all these hammerheads set to do this. And once the Nebulons jump out, they're going to do other things. And all of this is pre-programmed. So all of this stuff you set up in advance. And then all you have to do is summon and hit the go code. And all of it will just play out. And it will all happen according to your instructions. So all of this happens, all the planning's done in advance. So all you have to do is hit one button. And as the Nebulons go, they'll have, so pretend the Nebulons are in MLCC. They'll have their own set of commands. And as they do what they're doing, they'll have escorts. in their little task forces as they spread out all over the sector, because sometimes what you do is you'll take on like multiple combat missions at once. So you have ships over here, ships over here. Your capital ships are probably going to spread out, and it's good to have escorts with them because an unescorted ship can get overwhelmed and swarm pretty quickly. So you don't have to set all your corvettes to this, right? We still have our other corvettes, which are, their job is to seek out and destroy all the fighters. The hammerheads aren't focusing on fighters, they're focusing on helping the Nebulons. And another thing you can do is, remember we had that K-Wing, which was our missile defense chaff ship? You can, there's an order in here, so not assist, in configuration. So pretend instead of a hammerhead, this is our K-Wing. Let's pretend this is the, so I don't want to mess this up, but there is a escort and you can do follow. So we can have our K-Wings in MLCC. Actually, I'm not sure if you can put an M8 in MLCC. I'll have to check that. But if not, you can use an M7M, which also has missile turrets. But you can have those in MLCC, and you could have those set to escort, follow a capital ship, any capitals, and their turrets and their CCDS systems will be set to shoot down all missiles, just like that K-Wing I was showing off earlier. And they'll automatically find capital ships to protect, and they'll just follow those ships and protect them. So you can have your defense ships on an escort follow, and that is an excellent way to do it. And say I was flying a capital ship myself. So if I was in my own Nebulon, I summoned the hammerheads and I gave them the command. That counts as something they can escort. So the player's current ship counts as one of your ships for MLCC purposes. So the hammerheads would have divided themselves among the two Nebulons in here and me. So I would have gotten my own little escort task force of hammerheads. And it's not just hammerheads, right? We could have Nebulon set to escort bigger ships, or we could have bigger ships set to escort smaller ships. The possibilities are really endless. And then at any time, right, we can issue the retreat order, and they will retreat. And the Nebulons didn't retreat because they're not actually in MLCC. They're just ships I told to move to those positions. They're just random ships. So I think I've covered everything there is to know about assist, retreat, restock, those are pretty basic, and the escort and assault functionalities. Next I'm going to cover carrier with MLCC, rules of engagement for missiles, and the bomber function. So we're on a different save now. This is actually the main menu with the big Star Destroyer versus Home 1 fight. It was actually this save game in this very sector that did it. So I have a proper setup here. So I have 4 Starliner docks, and this is not optimal at all. You want to put each dock in its own sector at the very center, right? So V Beta, V Gamma, V Delta, all these sectors are perfect for it. But I have them all like randomly over here, and there's a jump beacon, and so each Starliner dock houses, like this one's all Carracks, this one's Star Destroyers and Victories, and this one is just extra. I have it, for future expansion. And then I have the McCallum dock that has all the Tartans and whatever other Corvettes I would have. So that's, and then each one has freighters working for it that are adhering to the Dockware Manager, and that they get the cells. I guess I didn't even set the source yet, but I would set that to the Saturn Complex Hub that produces them, or my headquarters most likely. So I'm going to be using this save file to explain the remaining features of MLCC. Something I forgot to mention is that you can't summon a ship if it doesn't have 100% hull strength. So in the early game, when you're using MLCC, if your ship takes damage and it retreats, that's fine, right? I mean, it did what it was supposed to do. Everything's good. It's that you can't summon it again until it's repaired. So if you find a repair ship, we actually added a script to the mod where you can order a repair ship to repair all ships in sectors. So you can just have the ship sitting in your MLCC sector running that command. And then say I had a ship that was damaged at my MLCC base, I would just tell it, I would select it, give it a manual command, tell it to just undock or idle. The repair ship would see it, go up to it, repair it, and then whenever I can just issue the MLCC retreat command, the MLCC ship will return to the station, the repair ship will continue prowling the sector for additional ships to repair, and it will be good to go. But once you have your headquarters, which I do in this save, This is my player headquarters. Of course, we've got rebels invading. But what happens is MLCC is smart enough to know if you have the headquarters. So if your ships take damage and once they retreat and return home with hull damage, they will automatically be sent to your headquarters. And I don't know if I have any landed here now. I do not. But they'll automatically be sent here, and then you can just open your repair queue right here and just, sorry, that's not repair. I don't have any damaged ships here. But they'll just show up in your repair queue, just repair them, and after you repair them, just issue the retreat command, and they'll return home. And it's that simple. So MLCC automatically integrates with that. So you don't really have to deal with anything when worrying about repairs. Okay, I need to use these guys to as a demonstration for something. I think I'm going to go over the bomber command. So real quick, I'm going to explain how M7Ms work. So let's jump to Sanctuary of Darkness, where we have a lovely Fat-on Corporation shenanigans going on. So before I cover the bomber command, I need to give a brief crash course on how missile turrets work. So the bomber command is, if you go to MLCC configuration, most ships only have assault and escort. If the ship contains at least one missile turret, which M7Ms do, like our victories that we have, they will unlock the bomber command. So let's grab one. Remember, MLCC ships are not locked into the system. You can tell them to do manual things at any time. So this is a Victory missile destroyer. It has missile turrets on the left and right towards the front of the ship, and each one shoots 3 missiles. And if we look in the ship itself, or cargo, it's got 2 main missiles it uses. It's got the Ghoul missiles, which are the cluster orange missiles that, you know, they shoot a ton at a time and they go after fighters. It's got the Spectre missiles, which are the heavy, slow missiles that wreck capitals in large numbers. So if you normally how ships fire missiles, and this includes M7Ms, is in their command console, you will see that they have missile fire probability. And of course, here I have it at 100, right? I'm not actually running the bomber command on this ship. I'm using, I think it's assault like any other ship. So the missiles will acquire targets just like any other turret. And this includes things like the K-Wing that also have missile turrets. So these bottom left and right turrets are missile turrets. And what they're going to do is attack enemies, as I have here, but they're not going to be able to determine which missile should I use, right? So it has 2 missiles. One's good for fighters and one's good for capital ships. If you shoot the what do they call it? Shadow Spectre missiles, the slow ones, at fighters, they're going to be pretty useless because they're slow and they're not going to be able to catch the fighters. And if you shoot the Ghoul missiles, which are the anti-fighter swarm missiles, at a capital ship, well, it's kind of going to be a waste because those missiles don't do enough damage to justify using them on capital ships. They're mainly for swarming fighters. So we have 2 distinct missile types, and we don't have a way to actually discriminate. So I'm not running the bomber command. If I jump into the ship, you can see that Spectre is equipped. And if I were to, let's point ourselves at the enemy. So if I were to launch missiles, you can see that it's using all the missile turrets, but it's only shooting Spectres because that's what's equipped. And you can equip them by, just normally hop in the ship. I think it works, actually I'm not sure how it determines what's equipped by default, but Spectres are equipped. So this ship is not using the regular missile fire chance. I'm pretty sure it's only going to shoot Spectres if they're in range. And I know that station's out of range because the ship would already be shooting if they were in range. So you don't have to give it a command in order to shoot the missiles. It's automatically going to do it because it's special. It has missile turrets. This missile fire probability is mostly for ships that don't have missile turrets because, all ships can shoot missiles. And they'll use random missiles from what's in their cargo. I'm pretty sure the M7M, and I may be wrong about this because I don't have a lot of experience with them, will only use whatever's currently equipped because the turrets are different. MLCC bomber and rules of engagement are completely different. So let's go over rules of engagement before bomber real quick. So Victory Missile Destroyer in our MLCC configuration, right? So assault, none. So it's actually pretty basic. The first is capitals and medium ships, and the second is ships. This is all they're doing. But you can see rules of engagement. We have one down here for Victory Missile Destroyer. So if you want to create a rule of engagement, and this isn't limited to M7Ms, and the reason is because basically I threw this fleet together pretty quick so I could get some good screenshots for the loading screen, which it did very well at that. But you can set custom rules for all your ships using missiles. So say I have Tartan patrol cruisers and they have 2 types of missiles on board, and I want them to use those 2 types of missiles on specific targets for specific reasons at specific ranges at specific intervals, rather than just fire indiscriminately like the vanilla system. I would find a Tartan here, so I'd go to, let's see, M6, Tartan Patrol Cruiser, and it only lets you pick stuff that you've, I think, discovered, and then you hit new. But we're not going to do that because, let's delete this ship. So we don't have missiles on our Tartans, but if we did, we could set up a custom rule of engagement. And typically, I don't really get into this. I usually just use the vanilla system because I don't really care about maximum efficiency for my fleets. For me, it's just about, what creates the best visuals, and missile shooting everywhere looks great. So my fleets are not optimal. So everything you're seeing here is not an optimal fleet. It's a fleet that was thrown together. But if we look at our missile Victory Destroyer, you can see it has rules of engagement. So Spectre missiles, let's see. I have 4 rules of engagement here. So if we hit, it's set to fire Spectre missiles at a range of 500 to 30,000 meters, so 30 kilometers, every 50% chance. So I think this is every tick or every second or every interval. I don't know what that interval actually is. There'll be a 50% chance that this ROF is checked. So what it does is it fires the big missiles at an M7. I have it same for M2 and M1. I've copied the same rule. So it shoots Spectre missiles at those 3 ship types, and I could add stations. So this is where you add it up here. You select your class, you select which missile you want, and then you hit new class target, and it pops up here. Sure, let's set it up for stations. So new class target, we pick station, so that just appeared here. New missile ROE, Spectre missile is what we want. We're going to click on that. We want it to be, let's say, 100%. So if we see a station, we want to prioritize that and shoot Spectre missiles at it. Let's set the range to, let's see, how far is that station actually?
Headquarters.
72 kilometers. So if we go to our rules of engagement and we go to 70 kilometers or above. So the ship, if the ship would normally shoot at that station, it would right now, because the ship's turrets are always running their commands, and those commands are attack all, and that includes the station. So back to MLCC configuration. Let's look at our missile rules of engagement. This is minimum range. So we added a rule to fire at stations at this crazy range 100% of the time. And below this, we also have fighters. So you'll see my Victory Destroyers will shoot the purple missiles at the big ships and the stations now, but they'll fire the ghoul missiles, even though those aren't equipped at the turrets, at fighters when fighters show up. And ghouls excel at killing fighters. Same with the flail barrage missiles for the Commonwealth factions. So now the ship is able to use both types of missiles at the same time against multiple targets. Now, it's not doing it now because as of MLCC, it only works when they're running their MLCC commands. So we're going to retreat this guy. I thought I told it to retreat. Okay, so here's what happens. You can jump in and fly MLCC ships all you want, but doing so removes the home base. Whenever you jump in a ship, it removes the home base. So I'm going to reset this home base to Starliner 2, and now it's part of the MLCC network again. So actually, that's interesting. Just being a part of the MLCC network is enough for this ship to use the ROEs. So the ROEs apply to any ship that's a part of MLCC. So what defines what a ship, remember, a ship is a part of the MLCC network when it is home based to an MLCC station. And all you have to do to remove a ship from MLCC is unhome base it and then change the name back to something normal. Actually, hold on, never mind. That's not, forget what I just said. There is a random fighter nearby. It's not running its ROEs. The turrets are just running their regular attack all command. And because they're missile turrets, they're able to actually shoot the missiles. And these are not the missiles that are supposed to go after fighters, despite them killing that because it's a slow fighter. So sorry about that. I know this is probably extremely confusing, but the ship is just here on my orders to follow me. It's not actually running MLCC. So it will run those ROEs once we have MLCC going. So let's, real quick, because I'm so far out, I'm going to increase the ghoul missile range. So let's turn this down to 50%. Let's turn the ghoul missile range up to something ridiculous. So 80k, because I know there's fighters in this sector. So let's retreat. That should send this ship home. And then if we check our MLCC sector, it's returning home. I don't want to wait for it, so I'm going to summon anyway. So I'm going to turn off all these, just summon the Victory missile destroyers. I'm going to jump, rally jump beacon. So I have 5 total destroyers, so I'm just summoning the other 4. So I'm going to give the command, and they should be using their missile ROEs. And I don't know if their command supersedes it, so their command is to assault ships. It's interesting that they all rotated like this. And actually, I think the ranges I specified are higher than the range of the missile itself. There's so many things that need to be considered here. Let's see. That's my freight. We want Spectre missile. Okay, that's why it's not working. The Spectre missile only has a range of 18.5 kilometers. So duh, it's not going to work. Some missiles, like the Commonwealth, what is it? The Hammer Heavy Torpedo, the one for the M7Ms, and the Tomahawk Heavy Missile, those have very long ranges. So they'll be able to be fired at much longer ranges. I might actually have to use a fleet with those ships in order to demonstrate this properly. But as we close the distance, and I'm sorry if the engine rumbling is coming across pretty poorly, they will begin firing their missiles as we specified, within the missile's range, of course. So that's the limiting factor here. There are longer range missiles they can be using, and I should have known better and gotten them, but I had previously configured these ships not to be long range missile ships and just be, you know, general skirmishers that jump in and shoot at everything, because that's all I really care about is how good a battle looks. I don't care about being optimal. So anyway, let's retreat those. I will be back with the bomber command once I have a proper setup for that. But that is rules of engagement. You can set that for any ship. So as your Tartans jump in, right, you can have the Tartans set to shoot missiles. So the Tartans are equipped, so Tartan patrol cruisers. Let me just jump them in so I can explain what I'm talking about. Sorry, those missiles were not the right range for that demonstration. So Tartan patrol cruisers are equipped to kill fighters, right? But they can also use some big, nasty missiles, like the, let's see, the Thorn missile is a pretty decently heavy missile that they can fire, and they can use that in addition to their regular turrets. So while their MLCC commands will be assault fighters, right, and then assault ships after that, and maybe escort, they can be running missile ROFs to fire heavy missiles at heavy ships. So while the ships themselves are going around killing fighters, which is what they're good at, they'll also be firing missiles at heavy capital ships, and the appropriate missiles for that. So they can be multitasking with missile ROFs. I mean, there's so much you can do with missiles in addition to MLCC. So I don't actually use missile ROFs. You'll see that they're firing missiles, and that's just the standard missile fire probability, 20%, and they have a few missiles in their cargo bay because I think they're set to restock. Let's see. Well, they're not set to restock. I think they just had them as a part of the template. So the vanilla missile system, the missile turrets, the rules of engagement, and the bomber system. There's so many missile systems that can go on, but I don't really get into the nitty-gritty of that. I just typically have, just missiles shooting everywhere at anything because honestly that looks better. And I typically win my fights with just numbers. So you can make the perfect optimal fleet where every laser fired is shot at a target that it is perfect against, right? Like a light laser against fighters, heavy missiles against heavy ships. I don't typically go that far into detail. You definitely can do it. I just typically have everything attack everything, attack all enemies, shoot at everything, and generally that's good enough for me. But the structure for MLCC is definitely there if you want your fleet to be perfectly optimal, everything attacking perfectly. And you can probably accomplish a lot more in terms of enemies killed with a lot less ships. So I'll leave that experimentation up to anyone who's up for that, but my fleet is just hastily thrown together. Alright, so finally, the Bomber Command. It is a special MLCC configuration that M7Ms have access to, which I think M8s as well. Any ship with a missile turret. So we have some free Virgilas here. They have the Hammer Heavy Torpedo, and we will assign them. You can see we now have the Bomber option. So Bomber will let you pick a target. In this case, let's go for, I guess we can't pick stations. Let's go for capitals. So this will let a ship sit back and fire at these targets and basically just be a sniper. And we will have it at 50 kilometers. The right turret, so the free Virgilas have a left missile turret and a right missile turret, and we will tell those to attack capitals. And then we will tell the ships to attack fighters at 50 kilometers at the secondary order. So once all the capitals are dead, they'll attack fighters. And we'll set the turrets to this. And remember, missile turrets, you don't have to use the special bomber command. Missile turrets will automatically shoot missiles at their maximum range. So if you have long-range missiles, just park a M7M, random, summon them, and don't even give them the go command. Just tell them to sit there. And their missile turrets will automatically shoot at things in range, which is the missile range. So if you have a long-range missile, it'll be able to do that. But this is the bomber command. We're going to set this like this. And this is a good way to cheese out the OCV. So let's go visit the OCV over here. And we're going to summon our bombers. So we've got a big, nasty OCV fleet. That is a nasty one. But we're already in range. So let's summon our free Virgilas. And let's see the bomber command in action. So currently, I don't have any turret commands on these. They're all set to none. So let's issue the MLCC command. The ship, I rarely use this command, but I need to cover it since it's a part of MLCC. I think the ships are going to sit at a range of 50 kilometers and just shell missiles into the fray. I'm not entirely sure what this is going to do. But it's one of the features of MLCC. Let's see. Have they been given turret commands? Looks like they have. Not sure why they're not engaging. They should be firing their missiles long range down at the enemies. So those missile turrets have been given commands by MLCC. So as far as I understand, they should be going off right now. Oh, and this is why. The missiles only have a range of 25 kilometers. So once again, I thought the missiles were a lot longer range than they really were. I think what I'm going to do is for the next Star Wars SWLU update, I'm going to severely buff those missile ranges. So we've got the hammer torpedoes firing off. And they should I'm not sure where they're actually going. The ships are moving high. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure the use of this command. I always thought this command lets ships sit out of range and just shell ships. And due to the way that the OCV works, is they don't actually aggro, despite being shot at, unless you go within range of the station's center. And then you'll hear the big Star Destroyer alarm, and then all hell breaks loose. But we haven't gotten close enough for that to happen. I think we did aggro this one OCV core. There we go. Now the OCV fleet is aggroed, but I'm not sure what this command actually does. It's it appears just to be a regular attack command. And if we gave these ships, if we put them back there and we told their turrets, like this, to attack capitals, it would automatically, they'd already be shooting. But I think the only reason to use this command over just randomly telling your M7Ms to attack at long range is, I know this command retreats them when they're out of missiles. That's something that M7Ms don't normally do. And it also lets you specify specific targets. So the attack capitals on the turret is not going to do, it's not going to be able to attack capitals and medium ships. So I think it gives you more options there. And the automatic retreating after they run out of missiles. But it's a disappointment that they actually close the distance. I thought the whole point of this was to not. So if anyone has a better explanation of this command, it's not very well documented, since this is a very obscure MLCC command, that could be greatly appreciated, and I will have to update this if someone has a better explanation. So I apologize about the whole missile thing. I don't fully understand that feature just yet. I thought I knew how they did work, but it's not something I use on a regular basis, so I don't fully understand it. If anyone has a better description, I'll gladly link that in the future. But I can explain the carriers, and the carriers are the final remaining feature of MLCC that I need to explain. So MLCC carriers only work with templated ships. So if we go to the template manager, I have these TIE interceptors, which are just basic, just guns and shields, basically, bare minimum. And you need to have a dedicated dock for them. Now, this dock can be anything. It can be your headquarters. It can be whatever. I always like to have them in their own separate little trading station, so I can just get a cheap Argon trading station that docks infinite fighters. And here it is, my MLCC hangar. If I look at owned ships, we have, now ignore the fact that they're named Secular Star Destroyer Wingsec because I was using them for other purposes. Pretend they're just called TIE Interceptor because they're home based here and they have no commands. And they're all the template, so they're all outfitted with that template. We also have a few TIE Bombers here. I guess that aren't owned, but it's not limited to a single ship. So this hangar is going to contain all the template outfitted ships that all your MLCC carriers are using. So if you have X-Wings, Y-Wings, B-Wings, A-Wings, all being used by different MLCC carriers, you send extra reserves here. So this is called the reserve dock or the reserve hangar. So this station is my reserve hangar. MLCC ships will come here, MLCC carriers will come here to look for reserves that they can use. So all of these fighters are available here. So let's set up a carrier. So in configuration, we're going to use our Victory missile cruisers as a carrier. So down here are all the ship types that can be used as a carrier because they have docking capacity. I don't recommend using anything other than Quasars for the M7s or other M7 carriers like the DP-20. Or M1s, because in standard MLCC, so this is what you're running most likely, you're not going to have the assault carrier option. So there's an add-on mod called Mars, M-A-R-S, for LitCube's universe that expands MLCC and adds a whole bunch of stuff. One of them is the assault carrier. We don't have that in regular LitCube, and it is compatible with Star Wars SWLU, by the way, but we don't have it, so what MLCC carriers do is they don't move during the fight. They just sit there and they launch their ships, and they act as just a stationary base during the battle. The assault carrier from the Mars mod, which I don't have installed right now, it lets the ship attack while it's doing carrier functionality. So you don't want to turn your Star Destroyers or your main battleships into carriers. Your MLCC carriers should be high capacity M1 ships that can sit in the back and handle fighters. Or what you can do is you can summon them directly into the center of the battle and have them launch their fighters there, and then it won't really matter if they're not moving because they'll be in range anyway and they'll be shooting stuff. The only issue, though, is if that ship retreats. So if the carrier retreats or if it's destroyed, all the fighters are stranded and they don't have a home base, and it's just a disaster. And you'll have to call in another ship to bring them all back, because likely you'll be fighting somewhere far away from the base, and the fighters won't have jump drives. So anyway, let's pretend we're going to use Victory missile cruisers as carriers. So let's clear their current commands. We're going to set carrier and hangar reserve. So this is important down here. Hangar reserve is this is where we set where they find them and what they're going to use. So our template is the TIE Interceptor Basic, and the reserve hangar is where it's going to look for those fighters waiting that are available. Now I have so many stations. It's called the MLCC hangar, McCallum Guiding Star. So this is where the TIE Interceptors are templated and waiting. So we set those two, and then here are the actual what the fighters are going to do. So we want the fighters to likely target other fighters. So in all other instances, except for MLCC carriers, you're telling your fighters to attack all, right? Broadcast all, attack all enemies, or broadcast dock ships, attack all enemies. That's severely limited because fighters are going to do virtually nothing against capital ships. They're not going to contribute to the fight. Their best use is attacking other fighters. So we're going to tell it to attack fighters. Task force. So what this does is MLCC it won't just send each fighter individually after individual targets. It's going to send small task forces after a target. So say there's an enemy fighter. Your MLCC carrier can carry 70 ships. It's going to send out fighters in groups of 4 to do the thing you set on target type. That way, your fighters always have a numbers advantage. But because the Victory missile cruiser can't carry many fighters, I'm going to set it to 2. And the only one we need to pay attention to here is the M4, because M4 is the type of ship we have docked. I know all these other ones are here because theoretically there are ships in the game that can dock any other of these classes. Yes, there's a ship that can dock M1s and M2s. It's called the Goner Iran. It's a vanilla ship. But we're only going to be using the TIE Interceptors here. MLCC carriers can only use one template. So if we wanted to use those TIE bombers we also have templated, we'd have to have a different ship type configured to use that. So we couldn't use our Victory missile destroyers to carry TIE Interceptors and TIE bombers. That's a limitation of MLCC. You have to use a single template for a single ship type. So if we wanted TIE bombers, we would have to put TIE bombers on Quasars or some other ship. And then we have to use a different ship for TIE defenders and a different ship for TIE fighters. So intercept range is the carrier sits there and it sends out fighters to engage targets in this range. And then, they come back and they just it's their area of operation. I typically set this pretty high because I summon the carriers first. And, I'm very proactive about how I summon the fleet. I'm jumping all over the sector, boosting out the turbo booster, spawning ships where they need to be. So I like to leave the carriers far off in the distance rather than having them directly in the fight. So casualty tolerance is how many fighters are destroyed before the carrier's like, okay, I'm calling it quits. Everyone return back. We're going home. So because the Victory missile destroyer does not carry a lot of fighters, its docking bay is kind of an afterthought. It's not a dedicated carrier. I'm going to set this to 100%. So we don't care if we lose all the fighters. We simply don't care because those fighters are so easy to make. We can make 10 fighters in like 5 seconds and have them ready to go and have extra templates waiting in the reserve hangar. They're disposable. So we are going to set that to 100%. Say half of its fighters got destroyed, if this was at 50%, it would tell all its fighters to return back to the ship, the carrier, and then the carrier would jump back. So it would give up. Now, proximity protection is something I don't fully understand, but I think what it does is if the carrier itself is in danger, the fighters are going to drop everything and engage enemies that are in this radius of the carrier. So say the carrier is sitting in the corner of this sector. It's launching its fighters at 80 kilometers to go do stuff and contribute to the battle, and it's sitting safely away. If somebody were to attack the carrier or enter within 5 kilometers, all the fighters would be like, oh shoot, we have to proximity protect the carrier. And I think they're going to just engage enemies within that range. I'm not positive on what this does. There's probably a better description on the LitCube wiki. But we have it all set up. So they don't currently have the ships. So let's summon the Victory missile destroyers. They don't actually have their ships, so I could issue the restock command and that would have worked, but I just am going to summon them and retreat them. So here's where it gets really cool. So if we look at Guiding Star, all of our missile destroyers are not returning home to their Starliner dock. Normally when you give the retreat, that's what they do, right? They go back to their Starliner dock and they restock. They're actually going to the reserve hangar, which is filled with those TIE interceptors, 150 of them, among other ships, and they're going to grab themselves some fighters. I wish they had used the south gate. I'm not sure why they're not doing that. Looks like the pirate just caught up to me. Anyway, back to Guiding Star. They're going to approach that hangar, and you'll see a whole bunch of TIE interceptors fly out and go join the ships. There we go. All these TIE interceptors that were previously just sitting there, templated and ready to go, have been assigned to Victory destroyers. The Victories have now, they all have their own ships. They all have their own fighter wings, and now they're returning home for real. So we don't have to manually assign ships. So that's a limitation that you'll run into when you're not using MLCC, is that if you want to have a bunch of small carriers, launching all those fighters and managing all that is going to be a nightmare, because you'll have to go to each ship, broadcast the dock ships, attack all enemies, and you might as well just get a Secutor or something that can carry all the fighters, right? An MC-80, Independence, or whatever. And a bunch of small carriers like this aren't feasible. So let's try it out. Let's jump to the west gate. Let me make sure the cruisers have actually... Yep, they have returned. Let's get out of the gate so we don't get crushed. So let's call in our Victories, and they are carriers. So when we give the order, they're not going to fire missiles because they're not doing that anymore. They're just carriers. So they've launched all their ships, and those ships are going to go engage fighters. And they should be paired in groups of 2. It's hard to tell, but they should be paired in groups of 2. I'm not exactly sure why the Victories are moving. Let me check their configuration. They're only set to carrier. So this may... Let's see... Avoiding. Oh, okay. They're doing some kind of collision avoidance. But typically they would just sit there. So the fighters have broken off. I think these fighters are out of range. You can kind of see the groups of 2 here. Once they go and kill that, they should return to the Victories. And they're constantly looking for new targets. You see this ship right here just undocked from the pirate mining outpost. And our fighters immediately saw it and decided to go get it. The only downside to MLCC carriers is, again, the Victories are not actually able to contribute to the fight themselves. So I could have jumped into the middle and then summoned the Victories right in the heat of battle and then, had them launch all their ships, and their turrets would just, help out. But like I said, that has issues where if the Victories need to retreat, they leave the fighters stranded. So that's why you want to get a big carrier and have one carrier to carry everything. or you can get the Mars mod and look at the assault carrier options. So one of the best features of the MLCC carrier is that it's smart enough to where if a fighter takes any hull damage, so this one right here, as you can see, this one that the cursor is on the map, it took some hull damage in the fight. It is returning to the victories. So the rest of the fighters are continuing the attack. This one is being sent back. And what's going to happen is when I tell them to retreat, this fighter, the victory is going to drop off this fighter at the headquarters. It's going to be, so it can await repairs. The victory is now going to be down one fighter because it dropped it off at the headquarters. It's automatically going to go back to the reserve hangar. It's going to find a new TIE fighter to replace this one. And it's just going to be on its merry way. It's going to be back to full strength. And if all of its fighters got decimated, when it retreats, it's just going to get more fighters at the reserve dock. So yeah, we've lost a few fighters here. I'm sorry I'm not showing the battle exactly. Now, all my fighters, it's hard to tell, but here's some moving, here's some moving, here's some moving. They're ignoring this Corvette because their order is to attack fighters. So this is where you might want to tell them to attack ships, or fighters with turrets might come in handy, because fighters don't have turrets most of the time, so they only their main guns are able to fire, so they only actually fire at their real targets. So I'm actually going to call the retreat now, because there's no sense in having all the fighters get killed by this Corvette that they're not told to attack. Another thing I could have done is, remember, they're not bound. I could have broadcast to all ships in the sector, all fighters, attacked that pirate Corvette, and then I could have just retreated them later and they'll all go back to their victories. But I'm retreating them now so I can demonstrate the hull damage. So even though I called the retreat, the victories are sitting there because they're waiting for their fighters to return. This is where the dock, if you have one big fighter that you can invest heavily in, the docking transporter extension, which allows the ships to be beamed aboard, comes in very handy, because typically when you retreat, you want to get out of there as quick as possible. And the carriers won't be able to do that until all the ships dock. And that means they have to fly to get to the right angle, right? And then they have to line up with the hangar, and then they have to go in the ship just like this. And that can take a while. And that's all valuable time that the carrier is being pummeled in a big fight that you got in over your head and need to retreat. So I'm actually going to call in some backup. And this is another good thing about MLCC, is that it's not just for the big battles. I'm going to give the go code. So when I gave the go code, it's not applying to the victories because only the Tartans were awaiting the code. So the Tartans are going to go do their thing. And that victory jumped out. Let's see, where did it go? Did it go there? Okay, so this victory that just retreated, it has 6 ships, and the 7th one was destroyed. So it's going to go pick up a new one from the hangar, be back to full strength, and then get back to its base to await being summoned again. We've still got 4 victories in sector, waiting for them to retreat, so we can follow their progress. Not entirely sure why they're not retreating. Let's give the command manually.
Target is now in firing range.
There we go. Most of them retreated. This one is probably waiting for permission because they're jumping to a gate. So if we look here, yeah, so in Elysium of Light, this is my headquarters. One of the victories is coming, and we see the 2 TIE Interceptor reserves. These are the 2 damaged ones. So the victory is dropping off the damaged fighters at the headquarters, and then it's gonna go to Guiding Star. Here it is. Here they all are. They're all missing fighters, right? So landed versus owned. The owned ones are already at the base. So they're picking up new fighters, and all I have to do is go to the headquarters, add to the repair queue the TIE Interceptor reserves, repair them, and after they're repaired, they're already template outfitted, so we can just go to template outfit at the HQ, the TIE Interceptor. They're already blue because they're already outfitted, and we will assign home and send to the MLCC hangar. And now those ships are repaired, and they are being sent back to await more carriers to use them. And you can have different types of carriers using the same templated fighter. So I could have the Victories and the Carracks using the TIE Interceptor template. And they would all share. They would spread all the TIE Interceptors around so everyone gets some. And this is a very pain-free system of using fighters. The fighters are all templated. You don't have to assign anything manually. They all pick up their own fighters and manage their own fighters. And if you wanted fighters to use missiles, you set the fighters to auto-resupply missiles. And you'd also set the Victories to auto-resupply missiles. So even if the Victories weren't using missiles, you have the carrier auto-resupply missiles just so it has some in its freight, so when the fighters dock, they get restocked. And the fighters you can't set ROEs for. I think you can only use the vanilla system. But, for missiles and fighters, you probably just want to use the vanilla system anyway to just swarm them everywhere. Or you can tell the fighters to attack capital ships and carry heavy bomber torpedoes or something like that. But yeah, basically the MLCC carrier system is perfect, except for the fact that, one, you can only use templated fighters of a single type, and two, the carriers don't move when they're doing their command. So that's why, in X3, the base game, the M1 ships were actually, they all carried, like this Shark, it carries like 75 fighters, which is a ridiculous amount compared to most Star Wars ships. But they're very weak. They don't carry a lot of guns, and they barely carry any shields for a capital ship. So Star Wars ships in general, even the M1s, are a lot more battle-focused, and they carry a lot less. So you may want to get a vanilla ship as a vanilla M1 carrier, like this Shark that can carry 75. The Terran Tokyo is another good one. And just have those as your carriers so they can just sit in the corner of the map and provide fighter support. And the fighters will retreat to that carrier, and they'll handle proximity protection if need be. And if your fighters are being picked off, you can always get heavier fighters. TIE Interceptors are pretty cheap, but I can always just make more and template out with them so quickly. Or get fighters with turrets. Or you can use a giant ship that can dock Corvettes and have the Corvettes assigned as the fighters. So you'd have the Corvettes in the MLCC hangar, the reserve hangar, waiting for themselves to be picked up. And that's kind of ridiculous, because I would personally just use the Corvettes as their own MLCC ships set to escort, rather than have them as actual fighters, like Corvette fighters, docked to a giant capital ship that can dock Corvettes. But it's possible. And there are more mods in the Mars package of scripts that expand MLCC functionality. And I've never really looked at that, but there is even more to this, if you so wish. And I will tag on any extra things I think of, if I can think of any, at the end of this.